Welcome back, everyone, to Red Spotlight, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. reaction commentary series. I'm Alexis, and I'm joined by David, of course, here for our wonderful show that is for the longtime S.H.I.E.L.D. fan that wants to come back on here and talk endlessly about the show that we love so much. Last week, of course, we had a monumental event in the Season 2, I guess you could call it the mid-season finale, Season 2A. Now we're going to begin Season 2B. Although I guess you could call it Season 3, depending on how you interpret the seasons. This is going to be episode number 11 of Season 2. This is Aftershocks, which I love the title for a lot of reasons. I think it's very fitting for what happens here. I think it's obviously kind of a nod to Sky's new powers here, obviously. And yeah, last week was a pretty big episode. We are going to insert something before I want to say the reaction that we have here that we filmed a bit earlier, which is a reaction to Emily B's section of Season 2A. And I think a lot of the comments are going to basically inform how we're going to view the episode. So if you want to put that in here right now, we wanted to break apart this recording to not make it super duper long. This section is going to be reacting to Emily B's video essay on the first part of Season 2 for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Last time David and I were doing a reaction, we had noticed a community update and that she is working away on the next video, and she was, I think her benchmark was to get it out before it was the year anniversary of the first video. We should also mention, look, that video, I think, primarily inspired this reaction series for happening in the first place. And so we definitely look forward to taking a deep dive with her videos once we reach certain benchmarks, right? So the last time we delved into her videos was after we finished Season 1. In Season 2A, as we're going to call it here, as David and I have been seeing, has really felt like its own season, even though of course it's the first part of a larger season. I think I don't know, one of the things that was not praised enough was beginning with this year. I think we're going to look back on S.H.I.E.L.D. for a number of reasons. But one of the things we're going to be looking back as far as what it did well and what others could have benefited from learning from is how to make a 22 episode season work. And the trick was to not make it a 22 episode season. The trick was to break it apart. And I think like Season 4 is the shining star of the series for a lot of reasons. And I think a lot of people were like, wow, the pods, they broke 22 episodes up into 3 parts, but they were all thematically linked. Obviously, that was one of the reasons why it was the best season, right? But I would also argue that that wasn't the only way to do it. And really, most of the series, I would say like maybe 5 of the overall 7 seasons, no, actually maybe 4 of the 7 seasons, followed this model where the first 10 episodes were kind of its own season. And then the subsequent 12 episodes where it's like follow-up season, where it bled directly into the next. And I think, David, you and I can think of a couple of shows where that would have benefited from doing this kind of approach. Mm-hmm. Maybe more than a couple of shows, honestly. I think you yourself said last week that, 10 episodes kind of is like a really good number of episodes for this kind of show to do. Not 6, and definitely better than 8.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, for sure. When we talked about this before, too, like when Netflix started doing shows and it's like 13 episodes each season, we mentioned like there's always that one episode where you're just like, it wasn't needed, you could have taken it out, or you could have rewritten it better or something like that. And we basically came to the same conclusion. It's like 10 episodes seems to be perfect, 13 is too much, but from what Disney is doing, I'd rather have a 13 episode. I'd rather have a episode where it just seems unnecessary than having an entire show where I feel like you didn't do enough.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, the sentiment that all of us are feeling right now. And of course, it also just depends on who you hire, right? And oftentimes, they're not hiring the right people. Oftentimes, they're hiring who? And that leads into a whole bunch of problems in and of itself. Look to the coming attraction, Daredevil, which will be crap, most likely. Maybe in some cases, it'll be bad and standard. But if you're thinking it's going to come close to what the Netflix show was, don't even bother watching. I'm not even sure if I'm going to bother watching, honestly, to tell you the truth, if that's going to come up. I mean, evidently, Agatha was okay. Maybe Jack Schaefer, who returned from WandaVision, was able to do something cool with that show. Cool. But like, and I believe Agatha had more episodes. Like, and also Agatha and WandaVision had more episodes than the standard Disney Plus show. Take the hint, Disney. Take the hint. Especially since I saw Agatha was well received. Maybe it was because it had more episodes. Who would have thought? Anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. We might pause a bit along the way. David, remind me, how much time do we have before you need to go?
Oh, I got some time, like 2 hours. So
okay, more or less for me. I got maybe a little bit less than that, maybe like an hour or so, but we can make it work.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and start the video.
So, only 2 weeks off of wrapping post-production on Season 1, the showrunners dove headfirst back into work to begin production on Season 2. Filming began on July 24th, and that same month, there was an announcement that there would be some pretty major new additions to the main cast. Firstly, Bobby Morse, aka Mockingbird, a pretty well-established character from Marvel Comics, who had already crossed over with the S.H.I.E.L.D. comics, and a new agent, Isabel Hartley, who would be played by Lucy Lawless of Xena fame, and both of these were pretty exciting prospects for fans of the show. Cast and crew were pretty tight-lipped on what this season would hold, other than, exploring the mysteries that had already been set up and left open in Season 1. And then, September rolled around again, show premiered, and fans would get one step closer to getting those answers. The second season maintains the momentum created by the end of Season 1 and runs with it. It's a lot more clearly split up into two, major parts of a story than Season 1 was. The first half of the season focuses on S.H.I.E.L.D.'s continued fight against Hydra, specifically the faction of it that's more science-focused and headed up by Daniel Whitehall, who's played by Reed Diamond. The second half would then move on to focus on the introduction of this new race of superhumans from the comics, known as the Inhumans. Most of the rest of the seasons would follow this format.
I didn't know this, but I guess it was confirmed somewhere. He is 109, or he was 109 years old.
Okay.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And I should say was, because he got killed.
So, Season 2 more so serves as kind of a picture of what the rest of the show would look and feel like now that it had really gotten off the ground. At this point, it really feels like they were finding and settling into their own identity as a show that was still very much part of, but still its own thing within the MCU. While Season 1 had to do a lot of the legwork to kind of bridge that gap between the show and the movies that it was sort of spawned out of. This kind of meta story about the show also sort of parallels the story in the show itself, at least as it has to do with Coulson and this new version of S.H.I.E.L.D. under him. He's kind of finding his own identity as well, as both Fury's successor, but also a wholly different director than him. When the story of Season 2 picks up, S.H.I.E.L.D. is still very much in the process of being rebuilt. They've gotten back on their feet somewhat, they've got a new base, new agents, and some resources to work with, but they're nowhere near where the organization was pre-fall. Hydra is still just as much of a threat as they ever were, and on top of that, the government is after them. So Coulson has to contend with all of this while having a fraction of the resources that Fury did. He literally has a toolbox full of secrets and resources from Fury, but he has to manage all of this as one man, which has never really...
Notice a much less interesting show would only be concerned with making this S.H.I.E.L.D. versus Hydra. They would not even add in the whole element of the US government, much less Inhumans lurking underneath the surface.
Deal with these ever-increasing impulses to carve the mysterious symbols. Basically, guys got it really rough this season. And he's not the only one. overall, most of the characters have gone through some pretty big things that change them significantly by the time we see them in season 2. And things don't get easier as it continues. Skye is no longer just an altruistic hacker, she's now transforming into this toughened agent like May, who is now the one training her. And she kills someone for the first time this season. Like, it's a choice that saves lives, but it's pretty clear that she's not entirely comfortable with what she's becoming. Simmons went from barely being able to lie to allies to being undercover in Hydra and even fooling their top leadership. And Fitzsimmons, as a pair, went from barely ever being apart, and it was a big deal when they were, to now starting out the season separate. And that will become a trend. So Fitz suffered brain damage due to a lack of oxygen when he and Simmons escaped from the bottom of the ocean. And that affects his ability to communicate, use fine motor skills, and just, in general, think as quickly as he used to. And to Fitz, such a big part of who he is, you know, his brain and ability to use it to help the team. So now he has to grapple with all that.
Yeah, we didn't mention that, although it was explicit that they took away from him the thing that mattered to him most. For the two biggest things it took away. It took away Gemma, and it took away his mind. And so he had to work out who is he now without those things. I mean, I think we kind of said it, but not directly as she just did.
I didn't think her presence was even helping him. And even when she does get back, there's still that rift. When she comes back after being undercover all that time, she's different. Her look is different, and she's a lot more confident. But they've both changed. They're both new versions of themselves, so they're getting to know those new versions as well. Now, I can't really speak to the accuracy of the show's portrayal of someone with, you know, the kind of brain damage that Fitz has, but it does sound like it was important to the writers, and they at least made a big effort to try to represent it well. The writers did a lot of research and talked to a lot of professionals on the subject. And then I did a little bit of my own and worked on it. We just wanted to make it as believable as we could and be respectful to it.
What? A show putting in effort?
Mm-hmm.
Doing research?
Respectful job of it. Like, you know, it doesn't fall into any of the usual traps that I think disability representation does. Like, you know, it's not used as a joke. You know, he's not portrayed as, like, fundamentally broken because of it. I mean, any supposed value judgments on him are pretty clearly attributed to, you know, how he thinks about himself as, you know, he struggles with, you know, dealing with all of this. Like, you know, his frustrations with himself and the ways that other people misunderstand him. And his arc isn't just about, you know, him, like, you know, getting better. Like, there is some of that. But it's not to the point of, like, trying to get him back to a place where he's like how he used to be. Like, he never gets there because a lot of it is about him coming into the person that he is now, accepting the ways that, you know, he has changed and making other people understand that they have to accept him too, because, you know, like, a lot of their issue is that everyone seems to be trying to treat him or thinking of him as the person that he used to be when very clearly he's different now. All of them are pretty different now, especially these, you know, 3 youngest members of the team.
Yeah.
How the show handles all of that, you know, in the future is a different issue that I will get to a lot further down the line. Probably put another pin in that for the exact same season. Again, at least for season 2, I think the writer's effort does show. As for other characters, well, May isn't all that different, except she's definitely more open now. She's basically Coulson's right-hand woman this season, being burdened with a lot of his biggest secrets, and also the huge responsibility of taking care of him if he goes too far off the deep end, one way or another. Like, but this all mostly leads to big character moments for her later in the season, so we'll get there when we get there. And Trip is here. I'm gonna be completely honest. I forgot to write about him in this part of the script for, like, my first couple drafts, probably. And it's not because I don't love him. He's a great character. He just doesn't have anything to do this season. He hasn't really had much character development since season 1, and I can't even tell you what his arc there was.
There wasn't
Going
one.
from being a cool, funny, nice guy to a cool, funny, nice guy that the team trusts. there's just not much to talk about with him. You'll see why later. Like I mentioned, there are new characters too. Ironically, Lucy Lawless's Agent Hartley is not one of them. In a bit of a twist, a bit of a rug pull moment, she dies in literally the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
Wild. However, her former mercenary friend, Lance Hunter, played by Nick Blood, does end up becoming a part of the main cast, and man, is he a fun one. He's a bit of a wild card, the kind of guy who seems to only care about himself and the few people who are lucky enough to have his loyalty. S.H.I.E.L.D. does end up being on that list, but until that happens, he's a bit of a thorn in Coulson's side. Although Coulson, in his, at this point, near infinite patience, it feels like,
Yeah.
does still give him at least a second chance.
Coulson makes it clear, though,
More
he doesn't have many options at this point, so he's gonna have to be a bit more forgiving.
Mm-hmm.
especially when Bobby is actually introduced, played by Adrienne Palacki, and the two of them just sell the dynamic of a bickering divorced couple who actually does still care about each other so well.
What the hell were you thinking?
What was I thinking? I just saved your life.
You don't think I knew that guy was behind me? This is just you peacocking.
He made you and he was going to kill you. And sweetheart, nobody uses the word peacocking.
Are you even listening to yourself right now?
It's kind of like a top 10 moment of the season, honestly.
Reasonable. One of us has to be.
Just shooting him at the same time.
Pence not with me anymore.
But like, I think that's a good point, though, right? It's like,
And Bobby
on paper, oh my god, this is so cliched, right? This bickering divorced couple that are now agents, like, that's gonna be bad. But they made it work.
Yeah.
Like, almost
like
immediately.
basically the same character but with a different gimmick. Like, the two of them are actually pretty distinct from one another.
Yeah.
For example, Bobby is actually very emotionally intelligent, and she uses that to, help her be a spy, to lie, manipulate, and to know when other people are trying to do the same things to her. It's just a lot more interesting than using the same stereotypical female spy template. We love Bobby. Bobby is amazing. And finally, Alfonso Mack Mackenzie, played by Henry Simmons, is the last addition to the main cast, and he is also great. He's a mechanic, very kind and down to earth, and that last bit is honestly a really nice grounding thing to have in a show that can get very wild and literally out of this world. It also helps him connect to Fitz, mostly because he's not trying to treat him like someone he isn't anymore. He just lets Fitz be frustrated, letting him work through whatever the problem is in whatever way he needs to while just being this very calm, grounded presence. He's just very consistently kind. He sticks to his moral code and strong principles, but doesn't do so in a high and mighty, holier-than-thou kind of way. At least in this season. And yeah, that's basically where things are at the beginning of this season. And I think at least...
I'm really curious to see the day when Emma actually releases a review of season 5, because I'm just trying to read between the lines here. Some shade being thrown at that season already, I think I can tell. Because she was saying about... I'm going to predict she's going to have a major issue with how the writers handled Fitz's injury and the re-emergence of that in season 5, and especially... I think she might have some problems with an episode that you and I have praised, but people have problems with when Fitz cuts into Daisy to get the damn inhibitor out of her when the doctor comes back. That's just a prediction I'm going to make based on what I'm reading between the lines here, which is totally fine. I mean, again, different opinions, right? I think it's appropriate to remind ourselves that, and I want to make sure you are aware of this too, David, that season is still to this day divisive. I think some people really hate that season. There are some that would go so far as to say that there are some serious accusations of character assassination on that season. I would never go that far. I go the other way around. Like, I think mostly from what I remember at the time, people were really upset at how the characters were treating one another, and like they were like, well, this would never happen. This would never happen. To me, the headspace was like they were teleported into the future and they saw the end of civilization, and they're thrust back into it, and they're trying to prevent that future from happening. Of course, they're breaking down emotionally and physically. That's not a surprise to me, you know? I know this is not the space to relitigate that season, but I just have a feeling that we're going to be fighting, quote unquote, fighting when it comes to that season. But then also, she had mentioned about Mac. Mac also, I think, rubbed people the wrong way toward the last couple of seasons. And I think, I don't know. I think maybe there is a bit, some valid criticism there, just because I feel like a lot of the times, especially with season 5, 6 and 7, there are moments where Mac, I think to some people, would seem unreasonable because of his moral code. But I feel like he's never coming from a bad place. I just feel like maybe his attitude sometimes rubs people the wrong way. Because she had just mentioned that he, at this moment, is not acting holier than thou or mightier than thou. I think on some level, it's fair, but I think it's also a little bit unfair, because I don't know if the show has ever shown Mac to be somebody who can't admit when he's wrong. And he's done that plenty of times. Like, there was this one instance in the Framework arc where he's like throwing a Bible verse at Daisy and Gemma while they're trying to get out of the framework. They find a back door to jump through it back into the real world. And I think the Bible quote was something about Moses parting the Red Sea or something. And then Daisy gets the idea to use her quake powers to reveal that this oil vat was actually the hidden portal underneath it. And then it cuts to Max saying, hilariously enough, they did not just use the Bible against me. Which is funny. So yeah. I think like it's gonna be interesting to see when we get into the later seasons, and I think you're already seeing shades of it, how there's gonna be a divide on I think a whole list of things when it comes to that. Do you have any memory of Mac coming off that way? Are you surprised that people might think of him that way? Because I know his Christian faith comes into more focus toward the latter half of the series. Right now, it's not really front and center. It kind of is revealed later on. Go ahead.
I can see maybe some people complaining that like that's thrown in like just randomly to try to make him a morally better character. Which I can understand as a criticism. But either way though, Mac is the big brother of the group.
Yeah.
Like he's they even said it in this season. It's like what is it? You're big brother, but you're not my big brother or something like that.
Bobby said that. And then in season 3, that becomes even more literal, because Daisy and Mac become even closer in season 3. And I think some people would say, well, it's out of nowhere. I don't know if it's out of nowhere. I mean, I was a bit, oh, really? Okay. Because he doesn't talk about it as much. He doesn't talk about it until he gets closer with these people, as one would do in real life. But I thought it was kind of revealed that he was religious in that way when Daisy was coming off of the Hive high. And remember, Hive is pretty much like, on the show anyway, it's revealed that most depictions of the devil come from Hive. And so it's interesting how we're talking about a devil villain, and then here comes this character who is seemingly of faith. Interestingly, if this show has several devils, it would not be that much long after that Ghost Rider would come on the show, which is hilarious enough. Demons and everything. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how we feel about this as we get to that point in the show. So far, right now, this is not happening. But I also do think, though, we should not just say it's the religion thing. I think it's more so just who Mac is. And sometimes he says things that I think are not right, but you believe that he is. And I don't think he comes from a bad place, but it can come off a bad way. I think one example this season was when he is driving Sky to stop Coulson. This is the episode where he went crazy, writings on the wall. And Sebastian Derrick, the guy who was killing people, he's trying to stop them and reveal what the actual city thing is. And then there's an exchange that he has with Sky about, like, imagine the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. being part alien, and then the disgust on his face. You know, that was pretty xenophobic toward aliens, right? And then, of course, his who would then, because his future partner ends up being a part alien who she already knows of. It's a very uncomfortable moment, I think, for her. But, I don't think he meant that the way that it came off. I think he was like, you know what? It's like, what the hell is going on here? Like and at that point, you have to understand his headspace. He's already undercover, already feeling that Coulson is not up to the job, and then this information comes into his lap, and it's like, okay, we can't have this Coulson guy in charge anymore, because they mess with his mind and these hidden messages, and what the fuck, right? From the outside looking in, it's pretty bad. Yeah. But I think the way that Max says it comes off in a bad way. Yes.
It comes off in a bad way, but then you can also argue, though, that he's probably just looking for, he's looking for answers, really.
Yeah,
like you said, like he's investigating to see if Coulson is a good leader. When he says that, it's kind of like, I need information here now. Like, is this, like, are we gonna have to put him down? Are we gonna have to, like, take action in this moment? Is this something that you would forgive? He's basically asking Daisy, like, is this something that you would forgive? You want to move on from this? Do you really think he should keep being a leader and all that? Like, he's looking for answers and just looking for an excuse to whether or not Coulson is the good leader or not. So
yeah. So and again, I'm not necessarily saying that Emma's wrong. I'm finding some things that we may disagree on in the future. Again, this is a prediction. She's not saying one way or the other. So we'll see where we go. Let's go ahead and resume. I'm sorry, David.
No, I'm curious what the arguments are going to be, because I don't look into much. By the time we get to like maybe 5 to the last ones, the people that I used to watch
stop talking about the show at all, which was so frustrating, wasn't it? That when we get to 5, 6, and 7, they acted as if the show no longer existed, which was so frustrating, right? So you had to go find different people. If that, I mean, at that point, no one was talking about it. I think I was watching I wasn't watching anything. I was just, whoever happened to be writing written reviews, I was reading those reviews, and then I found some other podcasts, on a much smaller scale, who were talking about it, but again, they were very few and far between. So that'll be interesting.
As a setup, this is a lot more of an interesting place to be than where we were at the beginning of season 1. Like, I think it very much feels like its own thing now. Just like the team, it's not just an offshoot of something bigger. Like, this is fully Coulson's shield now. And while I love season 1, I think this one definitely is more effective in its pacing, or at least in a way that I think will be more appealing for more people. Like, every episode really distinctly furthers the plot, whether it's the search for basically the season's MacGuffin, the obelisk, Coulson's investigation into the symbols that he's carving, or, the deeper look into Sky's past. All of which really effectively build up to the mid-season finale and essentially set up the rest of the season. In just the first 2 episodes, the obelisk basically ping-pongs between all of the different people trying to find it. We see that Hydra initially had it in the 40s, then Peggy Carter and the SSR took it. It eventually ended up in the US government's hands, where both S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra go after it. S.H.I.E.L.D. gets it for like 2 minutes, which is how Hartley dies, and then the guy Hydra sends after it gets it, until finally Raina swoops in amidst the chaos and takes it to Sky's father, Cal. After that, Cal eventually brings it to Hydra to, use them as a means to his own ends. The symbols keep popping up in multiple episodes as well. On the back of a painting, on the obelisk itself, and then on bodies, which leads Coulson to have to delve into his past as head of the TUNEIN project to find the patients that are being targeted, as his own impulses are gradually worsening. He does eventually kind of completely go off the rails. He willingly puts himself into the memory machine from season 1 to uncover the patients' identities, and after he does so, he ends up becoming unstable and violent to the point that Sky and Mac have to hold him down. Seeing their director like this clearly shakes some of the trust that Mac has in Coulson's leadership, partly because he already has an understandable wariness of all things alien, but that's an issue for later. Sky tries to lock Coulson up, just until they can finish the investigation, but then Coulson tricks her into the cell instead, insisting that he needs to do it himself. After threatening an innocent man with a gun and nearly killing the killer himself, Coulson's questionable choices actually do pay off. He and the killer find the, missing piece that they've been searching for, and this sparks a realization for Coulson. The symbols are actually a map to an alien city. His alien instability issues seem mostly resolved after this, but the seeds of doubt have already just well and truly been planted. But this discovery sets S.H.I.E.L.D. on a new goal. Find the alien city and destroy it before Hydra can release whatever destructive power that they think is in it. And in the midst of all of this, the show still is seeding out more and more hints that Skye's past might be even less normal than we thought it was. Her father is basically very unstable and murderous due to a botched experiment that was meant to make him stronger, as well as his desperation to find his daughter and put his family back together. Cal is a really interesting character because, yeah, he's not the best guy. Again, literally kills people. But you also kind of feel bad for him. It's so fun to play because in the back of your mind, you know he's a murderer. And then you think about everything he's gone through and you sympathize with him. Because what would you do if your whole family was taken from you? Who would you become? Most of the things
That's gotta be the best role for him, huh? Right?
Yeah.
Just trying to think about that.
Are all in service of, at least in his mind, helping Skye and, getting her to achieve her destiny, which I guess he thinks will, make her love him / need him more. And then throughout all of this, there's also more and more hints about how Skye is special in some way. Raina talks about how both of them are, destined to receive a gift from the Blue Angels, the Kree we later figure out. Plus, her mom was special. She didn't age. She could touch the obelisk, something that kills most people. Skye's not really having any of it, intent on staying away from the city and not falling into whatever plans her dad might have for her. But in support of the whole destiny thing, circumstances keep pushing her that way anyways. Even though she doesn't go on the mission to the city, she ends up getting kidnapped by Hydra and taken to her dad, who is on the Hydra base set up in that area. And that leads to a less than ideal family reunion. Cal is driven pretty strongly by revenge as well. In the past, Whitehall basically dissected, his wife / Skye's mom, which basically allowed him to take what made her special and keep himself young, like she was able to. So by the mid-season finale, Cal has basically everything in place for him. He's finally in a position to dish out the revenge that he's been stewing on for literal years, and his daughter is in position to, receive the gift that he believes she deserves. And woven into all of these plot threads are really effective arcs for nearly every major character. Obviously, Skye and Coulson's individual, journeys and stories are pretty central to the plot, like I've touched on here, but beyond that, there's a lot of other really compelling character work too. Fitz and Simmons are still navigating what it looks like to no longer be one unit.
Exactly what I said. It's doing two things. It's moving the plot, but it's not forgetting about character. The character is as important as the plot, if not more. So you can do two things at the same time every other show out there in this space.
The entire team on her back. And Trip is still...
Although, of course, there are some shortcomings.
I've been cracking jokes, being an all-around great character. We love you, Trip. Nothing bad will ever happen to you. I haven't talked about Ward much yet, but he's doing stuff too. This is a really interesting season for him. He spends a decent chunk of it as just a S.H.I.E.L.D. prisoner, feeding Skye information about Hydra, and being genuinely helpful in an attempt to regain her trust. However, the really interesting stuff for him comes after he escapes. S.H.I.E.L.D. eventually decides to use him as a bargaining chip to convince his older brother Christian, who is a U.S. Senator, to lighten the pursuit of S.H.I.E.L.D. that he's been aggressively campaigning for. This is the very same brother that Ward told Skye about, who essentially forced him to hurt their younger brother. So, understandably, Ward isn't too thrilled about this. But the deal goes through anyways, and he gets transferred over into the government's custody. But the government is extremely stupid and clearly underestimates him, so he escapes almost immediately. While he's on the loose, Ward ends up falling into this not quite the villain, not quite the hero role that honestly I think he's the most suited for. He helps S.H.I.E.L.D. from the shadows, giving them gifts like Whitehall's right-hand man, while also pursuing his own revenge, tracking down his brother to ruin his reputation and kill him and their parents. For the first time, he doesn't have anyone that he feels like he needs to follow, so we get to see what he does when his allegiance is really only to himself. And it's interesting to me that helping S.H.I.E.L.D. is actually a part of that. Like Cal, he also joins up with Hydra to use them as a means to his own very similar ends, as in helping Skye, putting him right there in the middle of things as everything is building up to and culminating to this mid-season finale. But basically my point is, there's hardly a second of wasted space here. Like, honestly, I had a really hard time writing this part of the video initially, just because I was struggling to figure out how to get across and condense all of the important stuff just for the video. Like, you can't do it succinctly. There's so much here.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of wild how effective the storytelling and pacing is when, you know, they don't have to completely work around one movie. That's why I say that, especially if you didn't like the first season, this one is a much better trial of if you might like the show as a whole. And, like, for me, I think this is broadcast television absolutely just maximizing its format, using all the space it has super well, super efficiently. And, like, they almost go too far with that. Like, from this season on, they seem to have this idea that they can only have one major villain per, you know, major story arc, which, like, works sometimes, but then other times, like this, it leads to just an extremely abrupt death. Literally, like, Cal and Whitehall are just about to have, like, their whole confrontation, the thing that, like, at least for Cal, the season has been building up to, and then Coulson just comes in and shoots him. And that's where it ends. That's how Whitehall dies. It's hilarious, but it's, like I said, it's just a little abrupt.
Yeah, that's an understandable criticism, but
Yeah.
I mean, we mentioned it too. It's like we understand Cal's anger. Like,
Yeah.
he deserves that, you know.
So, I mean, I don't hate it. Like, it would probably upset me more if it happened to a more compelling villain. It's just kind of a weird choice. It's a little odd, a little weird. To be clear, I do like Whitehall as a villain. I do not think that every villain has to have, you know, these complicated, deep motivations. Like, you know, sometimes it's great when they do. It's why I like Ward so much, but it's not necessary. I think that a villain can be just as effective if they just fill the role that they were written for well. Whitehall was written to be this, you know, creepy, chilling, mad scientist type, and he does that very well. Like, that's all he needs to do, and he does it. He brainwashes, experiments on, and kills people without regard, most just caring about scientific discovery and power. His catchphrase is literally,
"Discovery requires experimentation."
and all of that makes him legitimately threatening. And at least for this story, that's all he really needs. But that all just makes the decision to kill him so abruptly feel like, you know, they were just, you know, he'd served his purpose, so they could just dispose of him now. And, I mean, that's exactly how they treated him. Which, like, again, not a great loss to the story. Feels weird, though. They make a similarly weird choice with Ward. Not to kill him, but, you know, they very abruptly end what was a really interesting era for the character. So, after Cal and Ward reveal their hand and turn against Hydra, Ward and Skye end up as Hydra prisoners. Ward escapes, and then goes and frees Skye. But instead of using this tentative alliance until she can escape, Skye just shoots him.
Oh yeah, this is interesting right here, because you'll see what
Turn your
happens.
back on the enemy. You taught me that.
Okay, we have to pause here, because between the period of time where I filmed this and now am editing it, I have changed my opinion. So now I have to do more work. Yay. I blame my brother because couple months ago, we were having a conversation about this scene, and I was giving my whole rant for why I don't like the scene, why I think it's dumb that they have Sky shoot him, and it doesn't make any sense. And he brought up some really good points, and I sat there for a second and then realized, oh shit, he's right. So here I am, openly admitting that, you know, I think I was wrong about something, and it's okay to change your opinion when you realize that you were wrong. So originally, I always just didn't like this scene, because to me, like, I thought it didn't make any sense that she would shoot him when he's helping her. Like, obviously, yeah, I know that she doesn't like him, but I was like, oh, it would make a lot more sense to just, you know, wait until they're out, or that they can, you know, take him captive again or something like that. Like, you didn't have to shoot him. But really, I think a lot of that opinion was just born out of the things that I do and don't like about Ward's story this season, and how this moment shifts his arc into a gear that I don't like as much. Like I mentioned earlier, I really like the spot that he's in the first half of the season. I just think it's really interesting to see him in this position where, even though, yeah, obviously the team will never forgive him or like him again, I find it really interesting to see him in this place of, in his mind, he still thinks that he is redeemable. He thinks he can still win back the team's, and especially Sky's, trust. And I just found this position of him helping S.H.I.E.L.D., even though they don't want him to me, I just think that is very narratively interesting. But then the way that his story goes after this moment, I just don't enjoy that nearly as much. I find it to be a lot less interesting. And I think that frustration for me in not finding a character that I found interesting as interesting after this moment, I think negatively affected my opinions on this scene to the point that it was unfair. Because, yeah, it totally makes sense that Sky would do this. I mean, she's not the only one who tries to kill Ward this season. When he is, you know, being handed over to the government, Gemma threatens to kill him if she ever sees him again, and, spoiler alert, she tries to make good on that promise. Like, he has so fundamentally, like, broken the team's trust, hurt them so intensely that they hate him, and it makes sense why they do. I think they are justified fully in the way that they feel about him. And even if that hate doesn't lead to the most, I don't know, pragmatic choice for Sky, with how profoundly hurt she has been by Ward and how much she hates him because of that, it absolutely makes sense that she doesn't want any of his help. He kidnapped her in his extremely misguided and terrible attempt to help her, to reunite her with her father. So obviously she is not going to want his help in escaping. She knows she is perfectly capable of doing that herself, and he's just gonna make things more of a terrible time for her, as he is just repeatedly being so weird in his delusion that she could still love him. So, all that to say, it makes total sense why she would shoot
But then
him.
also,
And
this season
I think that my opinion
shows
on
that
this scene was very wrong.
whenever
Okay.
Ward wants to help someone,
Now
it's
that I've
never
brought it
just
up,
because, oh, it's,
we
you
can
know,
go back
goodness
to
of his heart or anything like that.
So at
I've
this point,
pointed it
I
out in their
recommend going back to
interrogations
Ronan City.
that the second Ward gets something over Sky, it was when they were going to give him over to his brother, and he's like very, very scared, but then he gets something over Sky, and he's like, oh, let me use this information and then use it against you. Like, that's what he's done. And then even with Agent 33, he's when she asked him for help, it's not out of like, oh, I can help you get out of this. Like, it's not, you don't get the idea that he wants to help her because, oh, I've been in this position where I just don't know what to do without that guy who I looked up to. It's just, I can use you. And he does use her.
Will understand.
That's how he is.
I love you. I will always love you, Daisy.
Her real name, she realizes, is Daisy. She feels guilty for letting him go, so despite Coulson's protests and her earlier insistence that she would not go down into the alien city, she goes into the alien city to pursue Reyna. Coulson follows her, but eventually runs into Mac, who attacks him. When he hears that members of her team are still down there, Trip rushes down into the city to disable the explosives and hopefully help them get out. He finds Skye and Reyna in a chamber in the center of the city, which closes after Reyna places the obelisk in the middle of it. It does turn out not to be a weapon, however, it has deadly consequences for one of them. It opens, revealing these blue crystals in the center, which send out a mist that hits Skye and Reyna and starts encasing them in a rocky crust as Trip watches helplessly. Trying to save Skye, he destroys the remainder of the obelisk, but it explodes and hits him, killing him. Yep. Didn't even get a whole season. Not one. Not less than a full season. And they killed him. He's dead now. Everything's quiet for a moment, then the tremors start. While I don't like how Trip dies, if you couldn't tell, I do really like this scene, and his death at least makes it even more emotionally powerful. Skye's crust starts to crumble, revealing her hand and then her eye, and then all at once it explodes off of her as earthquakes shake the city. Bear McCreary's score really shines in this scene as the music swells as we see everyone holding on for dear life and just trying to survive. May yells for Coulson, Fitz and Simmons cling on to each other as the quakes shake everything around them. Then it gets quiet again. As Skye focuses on...
It's also very symbolic because for the next couple of episodes, this is like... Yeah, he crumbles away, but her whole life just completely fell apart, too. Mm-hmm. It also works on that level as well. I didn't catch it the first time.
After this, the tag shows a mysterious man with no eyes in the possession of another glowing diviner, which is the real name for the obelisk, as he tells someone that there's someone new. So I love most of this episode and the way it pays off so much of what has been, built up throughout the season. The payoff of the mystery around the alien city, the, continuing mysteries around Skye and her past, bringing all of these, really strong individual characters and their stories to the forefront, and there's a lot to like. What I don't like is how they kill Trip. I hate it, actually. I don't like it at all. I understand why it happens functionally, and I think they attempt to justify it in the next episode, because, it adds this real cost and consequences to Coulson's just relentless pursuit of the city, as well as, gives the team a reason to be very skeptical of all of this alien and unfamiliar stuff that they're encountering, something that's pretty key to the second half of the season. But even though I understand all of this reasoning, it still doesn't work for me. And most of that is because it makes him feel disposable, like he's more of a tool than an actual character. Trip is really likable, and he fits on the team very well, but they don't do practically anything to give him much depth. Nearly every other character has something to do this season, some sort of major, part in the story or their own whole arc, and he just doesn't. Sure, he wasn't in all of season 1, but neither were Bobby, Hunter, or Mac. He's been on the show longer than them, yet they get way more attention from the narrative. So the fact that they don't do much with him, only to kill him in the mid-season finale, just makes it feel like the character wasn't valued very much, which sucks. I don't have problems with shows killing characters. I mean, I think it can be really good at, raising the stakes for a story, for example. But I just don't think that in most stories it should be done in a way that devalues the character or, shortchanges their story for the sake of other people's stories. I'm looking at you, Secret Invasion. Maria Hill deserved so much better. Something I do find interesting is that apparently Trip wasn't even supposed to be on the show very long. Apparently he was supposed to die, I think, around the end of season 1. So that makes me wonder if that's why he doesn't really have much of a story, because they never planned one for him in the first place. Even if that's the case, though, I don't think that makes the choice any better.
No, yeah, there's no excuse. They could have done more with them.
Exciting side, though, this episode does also come with the reveal of what Skye's real identity is. By this time in the show, it was, pretty clear that, what Skye's real name / origins would be some kind of significant reveal, possibly even connecting to an existing comic book character. Chloe Bennett herself had been speculating almost from the beginning about who it might be.
I thought I was Mantis.
I agree. But I also feel like, and this is, it really comes down to how much you care for Trip. The argument also can be made as well. The show didn't really put that much effort in getting you to care for Trip. And I think with Trip had such a bright and beautiful personality and riz, basically, with all of the other people on our team, that I think the show made the decision that was going to be his whole character. And I didn't quite catch it, but I wanted to make sure we didn't want to skirt that over. That she found her research that the intent was never for Trip to go past the first season. That that he was supposed to technically die in the season 1 finale, which I'm glad that didn't happen, because I don't think that would have been an appropriate time for a death. So I feel like, again, if we're just examining what we got, if he was going to die anyway, not defending the choice, but if the decision was made early on, this character is here to die, would you rather have happened in the first season, where I'm not sure what it would have meant really for anybody at that point, or would you have had it here? And that's not defending the choice. I'm just trying to understand more clearly, okay, before we get into what we would have liked, let's look at what we got. And I think we can all acknowledge, and we're going to see that for what it is, the death is going to be used to propel other things going forward. But no matter what, it shortchanges the character. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, was the majority of this season 2, already kind of planned out before the finale? Because I think you can make the argument that perhaps they had most of it mapped out, and then they were like, oh yeah, but we have Trip. So maybe you can make the argument that the writers themselves are like, oh yeah, we have this person. I don't know. To me, I guess, I like Trip, but I never liked him any more than anybody else. Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of comical when even the villains, I think, had more depth to them this season. We had more attention to Whitehall, obviously, but we even his number 2, Sunil Bakshi, got more attention, and I think also layers to him. There was even a whole episode where he was being interrogated by Bobby, and we got to know more about his past. See, even that, so you have to wonder, it's like, okay, well, I mean, what happened there? Because they so very, either they just, oops, they dropped the ball there, mm-hmm. or it was a concentrated effort. You know what? We're not going to do anything for him for whatever reason, whether or not because the actor won't be along for that much longer, or we just don't have the space for it. I don't know what the reason was ultimately for why they chose not to do more with him, but just the very decision to not do more with him does hold a little bit of the emotional resonance back. And then when you examine how good everything else season 2 was, it just feels a little bit like, what happened here? Everything else is amazing. And how many characters are we juggling? We have Coulson, May, Sky, Fitz, Simmons, Mac, Hunter, Bobby. That's already 8 main characters on the SHIELD team before we get to Trip. And then, of course, you got Reyna, you got Kel, you've got Ward, you've got Whitehall, you've got Bakshi. Am I forgetting anybody else? And then Trip comes in 14th place as far as attention is concerned. So, to me, it didn't bug me all that much then or now, because I didn't care ultimately all that much. I cared a lot more, surprisingly, for everybody else around me. That should not take away from all the people out there who love Trip and feel like it would have been far more meaningful, and I agree, it would have been far more meaningful if we did have an arc, if we did have some depth. That being said, I have to really wonder, when you already have 13 other characters that take precedence, what space was there for him to do aside from prolonging that death, putting it future into the season, and then giving him more time in the second half? Because the second half adds a lot more characters. We get Jiaying, we get Gordon, we get some other Hydra villains. Kara, Agent 33 comes back into the fold. Like, Gonzalez, Agent Weaver. Like, there are so many more characters that come into the second half. So again, I don't know if it's hard for me to believe it's incompetence that they were like, oops, I guess I forgot. I think they were just like, you know what? It is what it is. We don't have the space. We need a lamb. This is what it is. So be it. We got to move on. I don't know ultimately what the real answer is.
No, I mean, and that's an okay answer if like the writers like ever went up and just went, you know what? We didn't know what to do with them. So we just kind of put him there.
And that happens a lot, by the way, on so many shows.
Yeah.
That happens a lot to a lot more characters.
But at the same time though, like we're not, for me at least, I'm not looking for much. Like the thing that just stood out while you were talking, I love that moment of it was when Ward took Sky from the plane and the brothers, the
Koenigs.
The Koenigs. There was this cool moment where everyone's pointing guns at each other and everything, and then the Koenigs are looking at each other, and one of them like he's got this like mad look on his face, and his other brother is telling him like, don't. Basically like, and they tell you right away, it's like one brother is more mad about the other brother's death than the other one, or like he wants to take revenge. And I'm like, why couldn't you do that with Trip?
Okay, at this point it's beginning to feel personal, because what you just showed me was, no. Trip was not in 14th place when it came to depth. He was probably in 16th place behind the two Yeah. Oh my god. And then even further down the line, because I think you can also make the argument we got more with Isabel Hartley, who was in one episode. The Lucy Lawless, who was in the one that gets killed off, and then
it's I think just a little interesting thing that you could have done was put more of a rivalry between him and Ward. They're keep facing off each other. If you're gonna kill him off, make him. The thing that they kept doing with Ward is that they're showing him that he's like the best agent out of all of them. He was able to get away with them. He was able to he was able to capture Hydra, a Hydra member, and all that. Like they showed him he was the best. Why couldn't you do that with Trip? Show him that like he is the best of the best out of all of them. And then when he dies, it could have been in a moment where him and Ward are facing off, and then he gets like that call of like Coulson and Sky are on the ground. It's about to explode. And he leaves Ward behind because, like, I don't leave my teammates behind, unlike you, So there could have been something there. So yeah, but I mean, like I said too, like if they come out and say like we had no idea what to do with him, it's like okay, fine, I guess so. It's easy to get over because, like you mentioned too, 15 characters that they had to juggle. One's gonna get lost.
Yeah. I guess good news going forward, as far as like they never do this again. Everybody else who comes into the main team gets not only a good amount of like depth, but like actual arcs. I think, like, I think he may have been even less like maybe half the number of episodes that Trip was in, but they do a lot with Enver's character. God, what's his Sousa? Daniel Sousa, Agent Sousa in season 7. They do a lot more with him, with like maybe a third, maybe a half of the number of episodes that Trip was in. So I think like going forward, everybody else who comes into the main team gets a good amount of depth. So again, season 2, you could say it's a learning curve. Maybe they realized, oh yeah, that was a bit, and then in the future that never happens ever again. So there's that. But I would really like to know if there's a definitive answer somewhere on there. If what was guiding this decision was they forgot, they didn't care, there wasn't the room, or they knew the actor wasn't going to be around that much longer. All of those, I don't know. I mean, but I just want to understand it more. I don't think I'm saying, and I don't want it to be communicated, that any of that would excuse right, the absence of what happened here. Although I do, and because you run into a situation where this next episode 11, is going to do a lot of heavy lifting into making you care about, I mean, I guess I think what saves it is, maybe not for me, but for most people who love Trip, his personality and aura was so likable enough and already that for the temporary and short-term effect, you do feel the loss. Because you like him enough. He's likable enough already. I mean, likable enough is basically what most characters in the MCU movies are. So, by the way, I'm going to take this point to illustrate how much better the show is than the films themselves, because every main character on this show has more than just likable person. Whereas the MCU, they have nothing but likable individual. They have, basically the MCU movies have nothing but trips. And nothing far beneath the surface. So I'm using that to illustrate that point. But I'm curious to see what you feel about episode 11 then, because that episode spends so much of its time getting us to believe that the characters cared that much for Trip. But I think a very easy critique of that episode would be, well, how much of it would you believe it when we didn't see it happen? At the time, I don't remember feeling like it was bad for them to do that, because the story necessitates them needing to grieve over him and showing that there were consequences. Now that we're doing this rewatch, I'm very curious to see how it's going to feel to show the whole team basically mourn over the loss of a character he didn't have much interaction with. Really much of any of them. The most interaction he got was with who? He had the most scenes with? May? And then from season 1 was Skye and Simmons. So that'll be curious to see. Let's go ahead and finish this off.
I thought I was Miss Marvel. I thought I was She-Hulk.
I thought I was Mantis.
I know, imagine.
I figured it out about 4 days before they actually pulled me aside and told me. It's really, really exciting. Skye is completely changing, and I'm just trying to give it as much honesty as possible.
So, with the reveal that her first name was Daisy, her father's name was Cal, and that she has these new, earthquake abilities, it was pretty clear that Skye's real identity was none other than comic book character Quake, or Daisy Johnson, and the show would be introducing the Inhumans into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Only a couple months after an Inhuman-centric film was announced to be a part of the MCU's Phase 3.
We are big fans of Secret Warriors. Daisy Johnson is a character that we always liked. We always knew there was potential to evolve Skye into something else. It took a little bit of time, but we were happy when we were able to land on Daisy Johnson and actually have that work in our mythology. But as with everything we do on the show, we pull from the properties and we do our own spin to it. So we are kind of merging a few concepts and storylines. We've spent a season and a half with Skye. We've seen her evolve as a person. We've grown to like her as a person. We've seen her evolve as an agent. And now, finally bringing her to her origin story, I think there's just a lot more emotional weight to it because you already know her as just Sky. And now she'll have this ability that she may not understand, that she may not want, and plus it's compounded with the fact that it coincides with Trip's death. It's going to be a very complicated journey for her.
Up until this season,
Wonder if they ever
most material
talked
the show
about
would take from the comics
what other
would
character she was
be
going to
pretty
be
minor stuff.
if they couldn't get Sky
Like
or
a
Daisy.
one-off villain or something like that. But with this reveal, this would be the second main character who was adapted from a comic character, the first being Bobby Morse. And this just kind of added to the feeling that this show was a part of the interconnectedness that all of the Marvel properties had at this time. Just like the movies, it got to introduce and adapt big ideas and characters from the comics and bring them into the universe. Something that would only be further expanded on when, in the second half of the season, when the show would firmly establish the Inhumans within the MCU. At least for now. Not only that, but it got to set up a new show as well. The 40s flashbacks that featured Peggy Carter were a pretty natural jumping off point for the new miniseries, Agent Carter, which aired in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s mid-season gap and expanded the Marvel offerings that ABC had now. Agent Carter alone changed the look this year of Tuesday nights on ABC, in that we wanted audiences to have 30 hours of Marvel, 22 hours of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and 8 hours of Marvel's Agent Carter. It was fairly well received. I mean, I liked it, meaning that that look might continue to be changed for the better, at least as Marvel was concerned. The only consequence was that it did stall S.H.I.E.L.D.'s return for longer than the previous season, but like, if you were tuning in for Agent Carter, you were still getting your Marvel fill every week. And the week after the miniseries wrapped up, S.H.I.E.L.D. was right back on the air and jumped right back into the action.
As a brief aside, I'm very saddened that Agent Carter was so short-lived.
I know.
I don't understand what happened. Maybe it was the wrong time of year, and maybe instead of having it come on, because for its only 2 seasons, it would be on from January to March. Maybe they should have just done what they did with S.H.I.E.L.D. during its last 2 seasons. Maybe just do it as a summer show instead of a winter show. Maybe that would have helped get more attention, because when it came back in the winter, it felt like nobody was paying any attention to it, and the viewership must have been so low for ABC. And you know what? Forget it. Just after 2 seasons, you're done. Yeah, I don't understand. I also don't understand what stopped them from bringing it back on Disney Plus when they needed TV shows to come back. Especially because Ailey Atwell is such an maybe the single most undervalued person in I think right next to Lady Sif. Jamie Alexander. Maybe the 2 most undervalued people in the cinematic universe. Talk about like not knowing what you had when you had it. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and bring this part to a close. Last thoughts on anything Emma said for today.
No. I mean, it was a good breakdown. I actually did like the part where she mentioned that she didn't like what they did with Ward in that moment, but changed her mind. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, good. I mean, she brought up some moments that I was glad to bring it back. So.
All right, guys. Well, as I mentioned at the very top of this is a pre-recorded insert, so we're going to go ahead and close this part of it, and now I'm going to throw it back to the other Alexis and the other David. All right, so before we get started into reacting to episode 11, David, do we have any comments from last time?
Yes, 2 from episode 9. Yes.
Oh, so this would be for the Ye Who Enter Here episode.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes, first one's from Gary Marshall. I don't think I ever shipped Trimmins and always saw them as friends, even if Trip was evidently enamored with Gemma from their first meeting. We haven't had many scenes between them this season, but there were some nice moments in this episode, particularly like the little salutes they gave each other when going in on their separate missions. Hope they get more scenes together going forward.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then the other one's from Shieldvids. Hello guys, wanted to comment on my theories on the future Hunter Chronicoms stealing the monoliths. In Season 7, we know that the Chronicoms don't really understand time fully because the knowledge they took from Fitzsimmons was not complete. The memory tech they have in Season 6, Episode 6 allows them to create the time monolith. Fitz does it accidentally when talking to Simmons about the monoliths. So why would they go to
Stop.
Okay.
Go back to that part. You're saying that in Season 6, the Chronicoms now have the knowledge to make monoliths because they saw Fitzsimmons' memories, which is technically correct. Well, I mean, the only way to make a monolith is if you have a flint with you. The only way they were able to construct one was with the assistance of flint, and they had a previous piece to the monolith. That's the only way they would know of how to make monoliths, and I want to make sure that's what you're talking about. Okay, so they would have that knowledge. So I guess you're going to go off on the idea that they're going to somehow procure the ability, but again, they would still need a piece of the pre-existing puzzle. Just to stop there. Go ahead and continue, David.
So why would they go to Izel Realm and steal them? The future Hunter Chronicoms want to eliminate S.H.I.E.L.D. and stop them from using time travel to follow them or reverse what they are doing as they change the timeline. They steal the monoliths from Izel in the past to keep Fitz from using it to time travel. It is also why they are surprised that S.H.I.E.L.D. followed them and why they targeted a piece of the Zephyr in Season 7, Episode 4, and S.H.I.E.L.D. scientists in Season 7, Episode 3. All to stop them from time traveling through S.H.I.E.L.D. advancing tech. They leave it on their planet in the past for safekeeping, but Enoch and Noah take it to Earth to save the humans from their extinction level event. They all consider Enoch reckless for this reason. This creates a bootstrap paradox which fits warn the Chronicoms as a possibility. They cause the destruction of their planet as a consequence without realizing also Izel planet effects don't work on Chronicons. Fitz pointed this out in Season 5, Episode 12, so the monoliths can't easily be taken from their realm. Only non-organic beings would survive without being taken over.
Shieldvids, I want to thank you for that comment. I love the fact that you put this out there. And with all due respect, David, I got lost. I got lost. So I had to really pull up the actual comment so I can read it for myself, because at a certain point I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? Like, so I can't keep up with what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's why I had to stop it where okay, so I'm gonna go back to the third line, the third sentence. The memory tech that they have in episode 6 of season 6 allows them to create the time monolith. Fitz does it accidentally when talking to Simmons about okay, sure. So why that also? But you're talking about one moment, but they also have the entirety of their minds and their memories, so they wouldn't have to be limited to that one specific moment. I'm trying to go through this point by point, okay? So why would they go to the Izel realm? And they can't go to the Izel realm. The Chronicoms do not have the ability to cross over into that dimension. Nobody does. From what I understand, at some point, Izel was able to cross over, and the monoliths appeared alongside her. And according to some of the Incan hieroglyphics, she was able to establish some kind of power base, and she was being worshipped, as well as her monoliths, because she and her monoliths were literally imprinted into the hieroglyphics of those temples. That's how far back we're talking about here. So I don't believe we are in a space where the Chronicoms would be able to cross over into a realm. And they wouldn't have to, because the monoliths were already in a physical space. Okay. Now, a few weeks back, I had flirted with the idea of, well, okay, the monoliths begin on Earth. At some point, I guess you can speculate that the Kree steal them. Okay? The Kree steal them, or at least the Kree, maybe the Kree. There's technically two, aren't there? There's two of the same monolith. There's one that Hydra had, which is, I guess, is the one that the Kree used to banish Hive, and that one was vaporized. However, there was a completely different set of 3 that were already bottled up in the underground lighthouse. I guess the theory would be then that the Chronicoms took those, held them on Chronica 2, which would explain why Izel left Earth and spent literally, I don't know, thousands and thousands of years trying to get from Earth all the way to Chronica 2. When she gets to Chronica 2, they are not there anymore, which in my mind would then lead me to think that Enoch took them from Chronica 2, put them back into the lighthouse because he was going to use those monoliths, at least one of those monoliths, and if you take one, just take all 3 of them because they're a set. He was going to use that time monolith to transport the team into the future. As I was thinking of it, it made sense. I don't know if it made sense as I was saying it out loud. I think you would have to have the entirety of the continuity in your head and remember every little piece just for it to make sense. But I think what gets people tripped up is that we're talking about 2 different sets. And that's where it kind of gets wonky, is because why would there be 2 different sets? Right? Like, the main monolith that we're about to spend a season with is going to be destroyed. Then, seasons later, it turns out there's a copy of that monolith alongside 2 other ones we hadn't already seen before. So that's where the gap is. I haven't even finished reading this comment. Going back to what he was saying, the future Chronicoms want to eliminate S.H.I.E.L.D. and stop them from using time travel to follow them or reverse what they are doing. I don't know if the Chronicoms care to change anything S.H.I.E.L.D. did. I think what's established is the Chronicoms just want the means of time travel so that they can go back in time to Earth's timeline, wipe out S.H.I.E.L.D., and then establish Earth as the new Chronica 3. That is the only interest that they ever voiced as far as time travel is concerned. I don't know if they care to or care about any of the other changes they've made to the timeline, aside from the fact that they just want the power of time travel. The next sentence. They steal the monoliths from Izal in the past to keep Fitz from using time travel. It's also why they are surprised that S.H.I.E.L.D. followed them when they are targeted a piece of the Zephyr. Okay. I don't know how that can be possible. You're saying that the present Chronicons were able to I guess you can make the argument that once the present day Chronicons have the ability to time travel, they first go all the way back to, I'm talking about thousands of years ago. They steal the monoliths then for the sole purpose of keeping Fitz from one day being able to time travel. And then at some point in the course of the future past, they drop them off on Chronica 2, which then allows Enoch to take... What was it the Doctor Who said? Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey? I don't know anymore. I'm trying to untangle these weaves, but I don't know if... I like what Shield Vids is doing here, and I like the line of thinking, and I love it because... and I love it how it has nothing to do with what we're talking about this season. This is like so far down the road. And I'm not even going to bother asking you, David, because I feel like you're like, what the fuck are they talking about?
I try paying attention, but I mean, I got lost so many times, and
they leave it on their planet in the past for safekeeping, but Enoch and Noah. You see, okay, I think I'm following his wavelength a little bit there. I can kind of see what he's saying. So the whole reason why the Chronicoms go back into the past is to keep from Fitz one day having those Chronicoms. They pull them from the past, put them back in the present somewhere for the Chronicoms to have, which is why it's known they have it on Chronica 2. Then Enoch and Noah take those monoliths from Chronica 2 to the Earth because they need it, because they need to prevent an Earth extinction level event, whatever it is. That's what he's saying there. Okay. They all consider Enoch reckless for this reason. Okay. That would track. This creates a bootstrap paradox, which Fitz warned the Chronicons is a possibility. They cause the destruction of their planet as a consequence without realizing it, which would be kind of interesting if that's the case. They never flat out say any of this. I don't think anyone on the show, this is all just speculation, but it would actually kind of fit and would be fitting if the Chronicoms caused their own destruction, because that would mean that they would be the ones that were directly responsible for stealing them from Izel. All that fits. What doesn't fit is the original monolith that Hydra came into possession after. Well, first of all, I mean, S.H.I.E.L.D. had it, Hydra had it, but first of all, the Kree used it to banish Hive. That's the part. How does that fit with any of this? That's the tricky bit of piece here. Sorry.
I would just say Shieldvids did a pretty good job explaining that. I'm sure I'll understand it once we get to it and all that. But at some point, we gotta just go with the idea that they messed up. You know?
I mean, it's a retcon.
Yeah.
It's a retcon, but that does not mean that it is impossible to make it fit. You know, and I'm sure, as Shieldvids just proved, it is possible to make. I mean, hey, I think this is a far more interesting way, because we're talking about the direct mythos of this show. I think it's more interesting here than to try and make it fit into the MCU movie universe, because, I mean, you can if you want to, and I think maybe there are better reasons for that, but then also it kind of gets murky there too, and it gets boring because the Marvel movie universe has no interest in reciprocating anything, you know? So, at least here, it's part of the mythos. I don't know, though, because you could say that they messed up, but the S.H.I.E.L.D. team, I don't know. As far as, like, they always had somebody on, I know one specific writer that they had on every year to keep track of this shit. And they were pretty good at keeping it. That does not mean that they could not make mistakes along the way. But I also feel like there's probably an answer in there somewhere that hasn't been publicized yet, because I also don't know the exact context for what Fitz was going to mention the snap in the finale. Wouldn't we like to know one day? We still don't know the full context of that. Also, Izel planet effects don't work on Chronocoms. Fitz pointed this out in 5. Monoliths can easily be taken in their. Pointed this out in season 5, episode 12. The monoliths can't easily be taken from their realm. Yeah, only non-organic beings. Exactly. Okay. I think I agree with Shieldvids. I want to say that I think I agree with this. I like it. I think it's a good breakdown. I would be very curious for anyone who's listening to put in their 2 cents on the comments below, because I think it's a hell of a theory. And I want to apologize to David for having you read that, because I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have had you read it in the first place, because I don't blame you, because at a certain point I stopped listening to you, because I'm like, what the fuck? I need to see this. I can't even imagine what it was like for you reading this. I'm sorry.
It's cool. Yeah. But Serenity replied to that saying, I love that we care this much. You're brilliant.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely. I went ahead and liked it and gave it a heart. So for Shieldvids, if you're watching, please come back here and comment some more. I love theories like these. And I'm so very happy that kind of came out of us doing these reaction videos, because I can't ever remember seeing this theory anywhere else. And I find that pretty cool that we were kind of able to inspire that. So thank you very much for contributing in that standpoint. Anyway, I guess we can put a pin in this until I don't know how many seasons in the future, but bringing it back to season 2, which technically, I don't know. We'll see how this works, David, because technically, I wonder if this kind of works as a season premiere of sorts. Yes, it's season 2B, but we've got new contenders to work with here. So, anywho, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into this episode. This is going to... Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot to do my usual thing. This is episode 11, Aftershocks. This was written by Marissa Tancharowen and Jed Whedon here. Hey! And this was directed by Billy Gearhart, who, if I'm not mistaken, yes, Billy Gearhart, who we talked about previously. Billy Gearhart has directed... He just recently directed the episode 9, Ye Who Enter Here. He also directed Nothing Personal from season 1. And he also directed Repairs from season 1. Repairs was the May episode where she shoots that person who she thinks is telepathic or whatever it was, and she ended up being stalked by somebody else. Nothing Personal was the episode where basically Skye tells Ward, I know you're Hydra. And then we just watched Ye Who Enter Here. So this is the 4th episode he directed. And future episodes he would direct would be SOS Part 2, which is the season finale of this season. He also directed Absolution, which was episode 21 of season 3. He also directed the season premiere of season 4, titled The Ghost. And he directed The Good Samaritan, which featured the origin story of the Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider on this show. Other shows that he has directed are as follows: Sons of Anarchy, The Walking Dead, Torchwood, The Chicago Code, Once Upon a Time, Jessica Jones, SWAT, and he directed 1 episode of Inhumans.
Ooh.
Which, again, in the world of television, I do not hold any TV director responsible for the outcome, because we all know that in TV, the director kind of has the least to do with anything.
Oh yeah, sure.
It is the writing team, and it is the showrunners who are the directors, the real directors. How we would know a director in a film, that's who's really in charge here. So I don't blame Billy for that.
No, yeah. Kevin Smith has talked about him directing a few episodes of some of the CW shows, and I mean, he's really just there. Like, he's talked about it.
When Kevin himself would direct episodes, I forgot he even directed episodes of the shows.
Directed a few of Supergirl. I feel like he did one for Arrow, but I could be wrong. But yeah, it was just basic. I mean, people who've done the show from the beginning of the season or just been working on television shows for their whole career, they basically just like, you basically go up to them and be like, so how do we do this? It's like, okay, we just do it on this angle, they come in through here. It's like the quickest way to get this shot done. Like, he just basically kind of stood there, and so it's a weird process too, because like at one point he sat down with, I don't know if it was the writers or the producers or something, but they had to explain to him what each scene has to be. So like they'll be like, so they'll just go, this scene is supposed to be sad, this scene is supposed to be happy, and all that. Like, it's a weird process.
Yeah. Especially, I think there is a difference if you're a guest director versus if you are a mainstay director for TV. But I also do want to say, I don't want to diminish any of these TV directors' work or ability. It doesn't mean that they can't improve or have anything of meaning to contribute whatsoever. That's obviously not true. For sure. You know? I think... Elizabeth Henstridge directed 1 episode of this whole show, and it may damn well be remembered as the best episode. That should tell you the difference a director can make. I believe she also directed episodes of Superman and Lois. So sometimes you feel it, sometimes you don't. Clark Gregg himself directed a few episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I will say Jed Whedon also And I think Jed Whedon's episodes, low-key, are kind of the best of the show. So, I mean, like, again, sometimes they can bring it. A good director can do that.
No, for sure.
Maybe I should say a great one, because I don't want to diminish any of the people who have been involved on here, because I think it's all of these people coming together to make this happen,
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This was aired on March 3rd, 2015 to 4.48 million viewers, and it features the return of Clark Gregg, Ming-Na Wen, Brett Dalton, Chloe Bennett, Ian DeCaster, Elizabeth Henstridge, Nick Blood, and Adrienne Palicki. Palicki was promoted to series regular with this episode. And of course, our returning guest stars, or reoccurring guest stars, we should say. Kyle MacLachlan as Calvin, as Cal Zabo. Henry Simmons as Alfonso Mac Mackenzie. Ruth Nega as Reina. Simon Kasiandes as Sunil Bakshi. Adrian Pazdar as Glenn Talbot. Jamie Harris for the first time, or actually the second time, as Gordon. Fred Dreyer as Octavian Bloom. Henry Goodman as Dr. List. And Deechin Lockman as Jia Ying, who is going to be a pretty big character in the coming weeks. Cool. I think that's all we had to, and let's go ahead and go back into the episode.
Previously on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Tell me what happened to my mom.
Your mother was special because she had a gift. Whitehall cut her to pieces.
It would be pretty funny, though, if someone who's listening would be able to come up with a list of things that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. spent more time on in this season than developing Trip.
There's someone new.
We tried our best, and he came in like 16th place. It's funny that this is the only episode of the whole show that focuses so much on him, and he's dead. A little bit of connective tissue. Again, it begins like the beginning of a new season, a reset, because we're also beginning with a flashback. Mm-hmm. In the first episode of season 2, we had that Agent Carter Whitehall flashback. Well, maybe not a flashback, but a scene in the past.
Poor thing.
And we're also, the last scene we saw was adult Gordon, and here we have young Gordon.
Gordon, it's me.
Jia Ying! Help, I can't see.
This
What's
would
happened
be...
to me?
It's all right. Take a breath, Gordon.
Help me, please.
Before Cal, before Skye was born, before Whitehall captured her, obviously. But this must be right after her first daughter, Cora, killed herself. I think. Or maybe it's around the same time. I forget if it's 83, 84, 85. No, maybe it was 85, actually. Maybe Cora technically might still be alive in this.
It's a blessing you age so slowly, Jia Ying. Able to counsel so many generations through the change.
I won't live forever yet, Zen.
Well, even with the years of preparation, without your warmth to guide them through their transformation, these poor souls.
They would be lost.
That transition. What's really throwing you off balance immediately is that this is already like setting up. Maybe Skye shouldn't be with S.H.I.E.L.D. right now, considering what just happened.
The obelisk triggered a massive earthquake. Imagine how much worse it could have been if he hadn't destroyed it. He died a hero.
Man, they have no idea. I forgot about this. They don't even have a clue.
Just trying to keep busy. Everyone deals with it in their own way.
And I guess they wouldn't, right? Because Skye's the only one that like was talking to Reina about like the legend or the tales of like the Blue Angels and all that stuff.
She has a team documenting whatever they can in the tunnels, cleaning up, but it's slow going with no electricity.
Be careful with that.
Did you find Reina's body yet?
There's a lot of rubble to dig through, but not yet. Whatever gas came out of that obelisk hit you too.
I don't think she knew. I'm pretty sure she thinks Reina's still alive somewhere.
Trip prevented a disaster, and Whitehall's dead. We cut off the head, and while Hydra scrambles for a new one, I will crush them!
Was that blood? And here's the blood count again.
Really? You know what it's like to lose control? To be trapped inside your own body, unable to tell it what to do? To watch yourself hurt the people that you care about?
Yeah.
You see, that's an example right there of like Matt can snap sometimes and it can put people off in the wrong way. But I've never known him to like not see when he was like, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't have put it in those words because yeah, you do know what you're talking about. Because that was Fitz's whole thing.
See, everyone, to study Reyna's tissue and check on Sky.
Whatever transformed Reyna.
She was exposed as well.
So here we go. This is the beginning of them like, what are you saying? Reyna's transformed now?
Mm-hmm.
And then this scene.
With a chance to deliver a crushing blow to those responsible for Tripp's death. I'll take it.
Responsible, huh?
You have something to say, Mac?
You see Bobby's look there?
We at least something on the plan.
Please.
No one knows what happened. Tripp averted disaster. It could have been a lot worse.
And Sky barely made it out alive.
Thanks to Tripp, he sacrificed his life, man.
No! He traded his life for hers. And then he was shattered into 1,000 pieces.
That's enough! If Tripp was here, he wouldn't be arguing. He wouldn't be bitching. He would be gearing up to do what needs to be done.
Wait, have they said bad words in this show? I don't think they have, right?
Shit, damn, crap, maybe, but nothing like maybe one time. Are you saying that's the first time they said that word, bitch?
I don't know. I swear I don't remember them ever cussing honestly in the show.
They never say the F word.
Yeah. So I completely forgot about the pilot episode from the show where Sky tries to get away from Deathlock. If any of you remembered that, so sorry. I have horrible memory, but that happens.
You're right. He is a little bitch.
Dude, oh my god.
They say hell, but I don't know if it's bad.
Nah. I guess the big ones, it's F or that one.
Yeah.
So.
Bakshi may be even more valuable.
I'm well aware, but without Talbot in our corner.
I know. Without him, we'll never have a chance to get the upper.
Do you remember?
It's just "You'll never take us alive," and then they make fun of him later.
Okay, I was hoping you would forget. Yeah, all of this is staged.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing. Because I have to I really want to know, like, when you first saw this, did you think this was serious? I mean, because it plays that way until a certain thing happens.
I'll be honest, the "You'll never take us alive" was like.
That was the part. That was the part where, like, yeah. But this is going really hard. I mean,
Count 4 left. You know what that means?
Not really.
I think when they shoot May, and he's like, "No!" I'm like, wait, what? This can't be real.
No! They'll never take us alive! Besides, if I let you write the script, no one would say anything.
True. That was an amazing sequence. Can we just comment on that?
Well, my head's getting worse. I'm totally confused by what I'm seeing. Turns out the electronics weren't crushed like I thought.
Do you recall what's happening here with Fitz?
Wait, what?
Do you recall what Fitz right here is going through, why he's acting this way?
Hmm.
Do you remember how episodes ago they established that bracelet Fitbit thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
How it tracks all of Sky's like features, her heartbeat and everything. So he's looking at it, but he thinks he's going crazy because something's not adding up. He thinks he's seeing something and it's making him like that, but that's not possible. What is going on here? So he's thinking that the machine is broken and he keeps trying to calibrate it, but it keeps showing something completely like wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So he thinks his brain is having like a relapse or something.
Whoa, what the hell? Sorry, I like you. But once you make contact, my orders were to take you out.
Why?
My employers don't want you, Whitehall, or your phone a friend to get in their way.
It needs to be studied how it is that British men can just completely erase their accent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand it. How?
Yeah.
How?
Okay. Get in.
It definitely sounds more convincing than when American men try and do British accents.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing.
You've
helped plenty of people with powers. It's part of the world that we live in.
It's a plague, Sky. All of it. It only ever brings us death. Donegal, Chan Ho Yin, Creel. The list keeps growing.
Not the Avengers.
The Avengers wouldn't be necessary if we hadn't unleashed alien horrors.
There must be another.
Trip was in fragments.
And there it is. So a lot of people have big issues with how extremist Simmons is, and I think they get the idea that this is coming out of nowhere. But I think she makes it clear here. At first, you can kind of feel like with Sky is like, well, what? But I think the intent, anyway, as she says it there, is that this had been building up for the whole show.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, again, season 1 Simmons, loving people with powers, helping people with powers. By the way, Simmons is perhaps the single most important character on the show when it comes to helping people with powers in the long arc of this series. So it's not as if she's all of a sudden xenophobic about, aliens. It's just that her life keeps kind of getting worse, and the state of her friends and family keep getting worse because of situations like these. I think she's beginning to feel a little bit like how the real S.H.I.E.L.D. people feel, where S.H.I.E.L.D. keeps getting themselves into these situations almost as if they're asking for it. And as a consequence, people keep dying. And she also happened to be among the closest people with Trip. So I think it would make sense for her to feel his death more than the others. So I think with all of this being said...
Raina, let's not lose our heads.
What?
It tracks. Some people would argue that the writers made Simmons seem so extremist as a way to help Sky feel, or the plot point for Sky to feel as if it was no longer safe for her to be at S.H.I.E.L.D. in the next couple of episodes. So that's what I remember at the time people fighting about, was like, what the hell, Simmons? Where did this shit come from?
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like, I think it's a bit more complicated than that. But I think you are meant to feel a little bit taken aback by how extreme she was being in that scene, because it kind of comes out of nowhere, but all of the reasons that she gives, I think, are sound.
No, yeah, for sure.
Also, yeah.
And she also, what she just said is basically what Vision said in Civil War. It's like, we invite these dangers, basically.
Oh, they said bitch for the second time this episode.
Oh, yeah.
That bitch stole what was mine, and then...
I dreamt of the perfect reunion with my baby girl. Revenge for my wife. Coulson rained all over my parades. But you say she's done it.
She's changed.
Oh!
Yeah, battery on my plate.
I love that cheer. Oh!
I can't live like this. My insides feel like gravel. I cut myself when I move. I can't live as this repulsive creature.
And don't.
Jesus Christ.
God damn. That must be the coldest line I've ever heard on the show. I mean, we have to keep a running tab on that one. But very moving and effective scene. And we're already beginning to see just the downsides of what it means for both Raina and Sky, right? And I think we're beginning to get the sense that that might happen to Sky, what's happening to Raina right now. Also, can we just comment?
Once inside, I'll send for you.
I don't know, again, we talk about visual effects, we talk about the music, we talk about the acting, the writing, the directing, right? All of which are areas in which the show does not get enough credit for. But can we just take a moment to appreciate how freaking amazing that makeup looked for Raina?
Mm-hmm.
So all of that, are you okay?
No, yeah, I'm good.
Did your light turn off?
Yeah, I ran out of battery. Forgot to screw.
That's fine. I can still see fine. We can still see you okay. We can see you more than we can see Peter.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean, all those needles that come in, I mean, the transformation is beautiful.
You and Mac have something up and running, and you avoided backing him in that argument for fear you'd reveal it. If I'm wrong, say so. Because you haven't yet.
Right now, Bobby's so annoyed. Like, God damn it, Hunter. How are you so smart?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember you being this smart.
We're in a support group. Okay? See, this is the reason I didn't tell you. jackass.
I'm laughing because it's great.
She's not lying.
Yes, I was about to point that out.
She's not lying.
Yeah.
Technically, she is in a support group. It just so happens that support group is also about to commit a coup d'etat. But I mean, hey, she put fragments of the truth, just like what Marta did in Knives Out. You know, she wasn't technically lying to Benoit Blanc. She was only telling fragments of the truth.
Thanks for the schematics, sir. Ventilation system's all good.
They just handed Mac schematics to the base, and you best believe he made some copies of those schematics that they're going to use in a couple of episodes.
I have a little trouble dealing with my anger sometimes.
Join the club?
Yeah, something I'm working on. Let this alien stuff mess with my head.
And by the way, it was just established there. Mac just admitted it. Yes, I have trouble with my anger sometimes. So, and that does come out throughout the show.
Plagues must be understood, yes. But eventually eradicated.
Are you saying that you want to put Raina down, Agent Simmons?
No, of course not.
The sad thing is, she's not wrong. I mean, her being a scientist, I mean, the whole point of that, and Skye heard that, and she's like, oh shit, that's not good. But at some point in this show, there is going to be an alien contagion that breaks out. That's literally the next season that happens. So she's not coming from like a place of like complete, like, you know, inauthenticity. Like it's going to happen.
I'll send word.
There is one other thing. There's a man outside.
But I think what was also kind of, other characters were reacting, I think the way that we were supposed to, like, because you saw Coulson and May themselves taken aback a little bit by Simmons' suggestion that maybe we should just go ahead and kill Raina. Little do they know she's about to do it herself. And then comes this. By the way, this episode is just flying by. What the fuck? I'm sorry for cussing, but I'm like, we only got 12 minutes left.
Your heart rate was recorded at almost...
And then this.
300 BPM.
That's very fast.
No. That's inhuman.
Hey! He said the thing.
And I'm pretty sure the DNA results are running right now are going to confirm that there's nothing wrong with the data in my head, Skye.
No!
There's something wrong with you.
And I do remember Fitz does help her, you know, hide it and all that. But I love the way they play it here, that like he's running away as if like he's scared.
Yeah.
Compassion, loyalty, heart. And that is S.H.I.E.L.D.'s strength. And Tripp's death reminded Coulson that Hydra doesn't have that. And that is their weakness.
I mean, I can understand there are evil, atrocious, bastard, asshole people throughout the course of time. But I don't respect people who don't have the intelligence enough to join organizations that care so little about loyalty or life. I don't know what any kind of short-term benefit, money or privilege or power is going to give you by being in a criminal organization or a hate organization. But in the end, it's going to end with them literally stabbing you in the face. And so to me, it's just completely fruitless.
Also, this is just execute Order 66.
Literally. But the S.H.I.E.L.D. version of it, yeah. It's really delicious how S.H.I.E.L.D. using Hydra to basically self-immolate. And they all die in very different ways.
Oh, shit.
And also horrific ways, too. I think one of the things that S.H.I.E.L.D. never holds back on is basically every single bad guy, like truly irredeemable villain, ends up dying a terrible, like, gruesome death. I mean, look at that. Look at that. the bullet to the head, and you see it hit the forehead and the blood splat out. I mean, did you ever see that in the Marvel movie? You never will. That was more graphic than anything in Deadpool and Wolverine.
She's cleaning up the mess. Sorry, it was my fault. I knocked over the lamp when I was taking a sample of Sky's blood with one of those ridiculous hazmat suits on, and I don't know, I guess my coordination still needs work.
That's a really clever lie. I buy it.
There's something very wrong with me.
No, you're just different now. You're just different now, and there's nothing wrong with that.
It's really powerful.
For Fitz to say that, yeah.
Yeah. He was the one. Hey, look, I think he would know a thing or two about the team turning their back on him. And I don't think, look, that maybe that's too extreme, but I think it's fair to say he felt betrayed and belittled and dismissed by the team. That's not what they were trying to do at all. They wanted to help him, but because they didn't know how to help him, they ended up doing that unintentionally. So I think it means a lot for him to know what that would do to somebody else. And so for him to protect Sky right now is quite beautiful and powerful.
It's okay, beautiful. I'll show you the way.
Sorry, that's a good entrance.
It's a great entrance, man. A great line, too. It's okay, beautiful. I'll show you the way. Which wraps around to the beginning of the episode when it was Jiaying who was showing him the way.
We're gonna laugh a lot less. That's for sure.
I mean, I will say it is different without him, like already in this episode. Like,
right?
You know, you mentioned him multiple times. Like, he just had this presence. What was it, Riz to him and all that.
I think that's the interesting thing about this. I know that we in the insert that we put in here before the reaction, we spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth about it. You know, I feel personally for me, it doesn't rise to the point where it brings everything else down because everything else is going so well. And again, I can't say for sure whether or not that the SHIELD team felt as if there simply wasn't much more to do, or maybe if they believed it was enough that they could coast on BJ Britt's performance. And hey, not for nothing. Look, I can understand the rationale for making that decision because BJ Britt brought, I mean, it was, the writing didn't do anything for him. So he as an actor had to completely make the character and he had to bring the presence. And I think, you know, we should not diminish BJ Britt as a performer because he basically had to bring it. And without, you know, the team basically writing an arc for him, he made a lasting impact on the show, and he was able to have a whole presence unto him just by being him. And again, we can have these criticisms about like, well, and valid, of course, that perhaps the emotion that the characters are feeling would hit much more if the show had bothered to do more with him. That being said, I do feel that for as valid as that was, looking at that last scene there when they're all together, ironically enough, you do miss him. He's not there, and it does change things. So that's an interesting correlation there. Really curious. Okay. Let's go ahead and go to one.
They're betraying the team, seemingly betraying the team. Everybody's dealing with this fallout and Trip's death and everything, all just in various different ways. Man, Simmons, though, that is the biggest 180. Seeing like how she's gone from wanting to help all these people to just be like, maybe I should just commit genocide or xenocide against an entire group of people and treat it like a contagion. Quite understandably, she doesn't understand it, but like she's just like fixated on destroying this thing. Now, as far as like the mist that petrifies everybody, that's not whatever, Reyna and Skye are. Obviously, it is bad. It does do negative things to people that are not like them. Like, they survive it, that's fine. But, like, she's concerned about the people that are surviving this thing. I don't know, man. She's a little unhinged. To the point Fitz is like, dude, I got a cover for your ass. Because she might fucking stab you in your sleep. I don't know. Mac is losing his head, losing his cool. Though, obviously, there's a lot of leftover effects of that. I don't know what him and Bobby have going on. They're after something that Nick Fury has left behind. Some kind of toolbox, toolkit, whatever. And some kind of outside contact. So I don't know if they've come back here to infiltrate that and sell it off. She's lying to Hunter. So again, another reason for all of his fears to be completely well-founded. And then Skye is just struggling with what's going on, especially with the revelation that she's the cause of these tremors. Her transformation triggered the quake that brought down everything. And in turn, crumbled Tripp's body into pieces. Now again, that's not a huge deal if we learn that that is irreversible. There's no cure for the petrification. We've talked about this a few times up until this point, every time it comes up. We have people whose bodies are intact, and then we have the little discs where it just turns you to dust. But then we have situations where plenty of people have just been...
At this point, he is not aware, because we don't find out until a whole year from now. Crusher Creel is the only one to be able to come back from that.
That's what's going to make this whole
He
thing
turned to stone,
either more painful,
and he only came back because his
painful as it already has been.
his blood cells were breaking down the Terrigen.
Turned back. That makes this so much worse for Skye, because that means that he could have been saved, but she killed him. Oh, I hope that's
really
not the
couldn't
case.
have, though.
We're opened up to
Ultimately.
as well with our cold open that her mother was working on this thing of other people like them that have gone through the process, that have metamorphized and come out on the other end with some type of ability and change, whether it's physical or just molecular, like Skye lucked out. No physical changes at all during her metamorphosis, but, like him, he lost his eyes, and Reyna became Sonic the Hedgehog. Obviously, Reyna, though, has completely 180'd on her entire stance about what this is now just because she finds herself hideous. She didn't think of the possibilities or the potentialities or what might be the other side, and now that she's gone through all of this, and she's kind of like, ew, what am I? It's now she wants to backtrack on it all, but there's not really any going back as far
She's
as
also
we can
in
tell.
pain.
Hydra has now been baited into destroying themselves, which was a nice play from Coulson. Risky play, but it worked. Reyna's got taken away by, I don't know his name. Didn't catch that. For right now, I'm going to call him Notcrawler. He teleported in here. Put up a barrier around her. I don't know if that was him specifically, if that's part of his powers as well, or if somebody else, like a team of them, did that. But popped up that barrier, protected her, and then coming in to save the princess kind of thing. He was like, don't worry, lady, I got you. And then
That's
bam,
exactly
her
how it was,
away.
basically.
It was smooth, though. It was smooth. So I presume, like, he's going to take her back to whatever that area was where they were gathering these people and, like, prepping them for their new lives post-transformation. That, once she died, I don't know, maybe he's been left in charge of it or whatever. Who knows what's going on, what the state of that is at this point. Really interesting episode. Really afraid of Simmons right now. It really breaks my heart, and I'm not on board with that at all. She's going full force that direction to the point where, like, she was, like, looking at Skye. Like, I think the second she got results, I think she might have jumped and started stabbing her. I don't know. She was giving her the crazy eyes. That's all I gotta say. It's like, you better fucking be clean. Anyway, solid, crazy-ass episode. Emotional, lots to work through, and yeah, man, we'll see what happens next, guys.
The thing about this episode is, like, it is very much one of these like resetting the table episodes, you know, where but I feel like because of the death that happened, it's a lot more mellow, or maybe more melancholy, you know. There's a lot of emotion going on in here, and I feel like what it did really effectively is, and I didn't realize it myself until, like, you know, he was pointing it out, like, oh yeah, this team's kind of gone to shit in like one episode, like every which way you can possibly imagine. Bobby and Hunter got their own issues. Mac and Hunter are like stabbing the team in the back. Simmons is like unhinged. Fitz and Sky are keeping secrets, and it's just like Coulson, he doesn't say it out loud, but I'm sure he feels very responsible for Tripp's death, and I feel like coming to the terms with whether or not he thought that the decision he made was right or not. Like, I know that when he was blowing up, maybe not blowing, but when Mac was blowing up at everybody, and he was like, enough, if Tripp were here, he wouldn't be bitching, blah, blah, blah. I mean, yes, he needed to bring Mac back down, but you also get the sense that in that moment, he was like, okay, him, again, re-going it through his head, trying to re-justify one more time that the decision that he made was correct. Even though I think you get the sense that maybe he's a little bit shaken, you know, no pun intended, obviously, but the tremors or the aftershocks or whatever, but by this whole thing. And I think it's also rare for Coulson to, as Sky put it, be this cutthroat. I mean, Jesus, the Godfather-like elimination of these Hydra bosses, pretty freaking spectacular to see. But I think it also, from a narrative standpoint, it is such a kick in the balls to Hydra that they're going to be down for a bit. Like, Hydra is not going to really be that much of a force moving forward. Hydra was the main villain in Season 2A. But as far as Season 2B, I mean, we still have Bakshi in play, and Dr. List will come back in and out. Dr. List is one of the people who we see in Avengers Age of Ultron, where he ends up getting killed by Iron Man very quick. So because they're still working with tying it into Age of Ultron, Hydra will come back around a little bit, but they're still in the background. As we move on into this part of the season, we are now going to focus more on Reyna, the Inhumans, Jiaying, Kel. Oh, and by the way, the real S.H.I.E.L.D. is also out there lingering around. So I think what I like about this episode narrative-wise, it's like, okay, we kicked Hydra so hard, we're not going to be worrying about them too much because they're not going to be our main adversary. I mean, they're not, we don't want there to, you know, anyone to think that Hydra's gone, because by the time we get to the end of Season 2, Ward is like, enough of this. I'm going to go back into Hydra and I'm going to make it mine. And so when we get to Season 3, which is really the last season where Hydra is a main player, Hydra ends up coming back, but in different shapes or forms. I mean, the framework hardly counts because that's a simulation. General Hale and her operation in Season 5 is hardly Hydra. It's whatever's left. And then Season 7 is just going back in time. So really, Season 3 is the last bit there where Hydra's a main force, and they end up getting flushed away because Gideon Malik is like, I'm going to bring back a century god, and he's going to help me take over the world. And then it ended up stabbing him in the face. And so, of course, that was the end of Hydra. And I guess, again, I want to just say this. Considering the reveal of the Winter Soldier, I feel like a far less interesting show would be very happy with just having the rest of S.H.I.E.L.D. be just S.H.I.E.L.D. versus Hydra, S.H.I.E.L.D. versus Hydra, S.H.I.E.L.D. versus Hydra. And I feel like Marissa Chancharoen and Jed Whedon were like, yeah, that's cool and all. We can do that for a season here or so. But I think we want to delve into more interesting elements. Again, I don't think anyone ever saw, again, look, the Inhumans, obviously. But then far beyond that, we're going to travel through space. We're going to travel through time. We're going to bring in the supernatural with Ghost Rider. We're going to have a virtual reality mind prison. We're going to literally travel into space and come back. It's a whole... I think what had made the show very interesting throughout all of its lifespan was they never accepted the status quo. And they were always looking for ways to completely reset the table and blow up the system or blow up the format the way that it was. And I think that is why the Hydra moment in season 1 was so pivotal for the future of the show, because they realized how spectacular it can be for a show like this to completely blow up the whole narrative, the whole system, picking up the pieces and seeing where you go from there. And I feel like, for the most part, they did that every season. Maybe not to the same intensity, maybe not to the same level, but at least at a point in every year, there was an episode where it's like completely pulls the rug out from underneath you. We're not there yet. Obviously, that episode comes when we get to the reveal of the real Shield. Because that, again, I didn't see that coming at all. Like, at this point, if you're watching it for the first time perspective, I was like, okay, what the fuck are, like, Matt and Bobby up to?
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what was coming. And then when it comes, I'm like, huh? So, yeah, that's all well and good here. Wonderful moments overall with Coulson and May staging that, like, you'll never take us alive. Wonderful. Like, even in an episode as somber as this, it doesn't forget to have some moments of humor here. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. I gotta ask you, do you feel they went overboard with Simmons for this episode? And that's not me saying I feel that way. I bring it up because people feel that way. Others.
No, I'm not joking. Like, I was thinking that when she started her little speech.
Yeah.
Like,
because I was too when I first saw it, you know.
Yeah, and I was kind of like, whoa, she's really... Yeah, she was
Cool.
going overboard with it. Like, hold up, chill out. Like, you don't know what's going on here. But then that line where she delivered it very, very well. Trip is in pieces.
Trip was in fragments.
Was in fragments. That's like, oh, okay, I get you now. This is just because you're scared of...
You're grieving.
Yeah, you're grieving. You're scared of losing someone else. Especially when you add on the fact that she just barely got Fitz back, you know, kind of.
I mean, she saw Reyna execute several agents in front of her pretty viciously, too. We shouldn't minimize that.
Mm-hmm. So, like, whatever she has, you know, I'm sure she's scared of that she's going to go after people she cares
and
about.
And also, she was with Hydra, too, and she knows that Hydra is constantly looking for these elements to create extinction-level events. So, I feel like she has had a rough go at it from multiple perspectives. You can make a serious argument that she has kind of had her bubble burst maybe the most out of anybody else on this team for as far as their worldview is concerned. Maybe not from a physical standpoint. Of course, Sky has changed and Fitz himself has gone through his injury. But Gemma herself has really, like, in the last year and a half on this show, she's seen some shit. And she's not the same person. I mean, we didn't even mention it, but, like, she almost died in Fidst because of an alien contagion. If we forgot about that. And I think I did a little bit here or there, but that's true. So, and it's been countless times when loved ones have been put in peril because of it. So I think, like, what I think it was intentional. I think you were meant to feel like, whoa, Gemma, like, can you cool it a little bit here? But I think what ultimately Elizabeth sold that moment when she was like, Trip was in fragments. And I was like, oh, okay. And it also helps that it wasn't just her that was losing it. Mac was also losing it, a lot in this episode. He couldn't control himself. And by the way, even doubly for him, he's supposed to be undercover. And he kind of almost, like, let it go completely because of how angry he was.
No, yeah, for sure. And I mean, he got alien control.
Oh yeah, he
and all
was
that.
basically I'm
almost kind of thinking like, wait, what is his response when he finds out Sky isn't inhuman? It's like it's infected, basically. Like I'm genuinely curious now. Like, how is he gonna react to that?
Right,
So,
right.
I mean, I can remember. So,
well, I think the argument that fits would hold up here is we don't find out for maybe an episode or two more. I think it's 2 more episodes. Maybe not next week, but the week thereafter. But the point is, the temperature is different when the team finds out then.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the argument for like keeping it hidden now is the temperature is too hot right now.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's too emotional.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Literally Gemma, Mac, Coulson himself too. Like, it's just not the best time for any of it. But I also do like what you see in this episode as well is Bobby. Very much, I mean, of course, Hunter clocked her, what she was doing in that scene. By the way, that whole scene when they were all yelling at each other, that's like most of season 5. Funny, obviously, but I do like that because, hey, I like how this show never was happy with having their likable characters always get along. It understood that for it to be a drama, there needed to be conflict. Ahsoka.
For sure.
Anyway, or literally any other show. Seriously. So, great, wonderful moment there, obviously. But we also got to see a scene with Bobby and Sky here. I don't know if they've had too many interactions before, but I think it's a really appropriate time because in the weeks to come, we're going to see Bobby be a big defender of Sky because she knows her. And the rest of her friends in Real Shield are like, kill her. Literally many, many times. So there is that. We got a little bit more Cal here. You can be a real asshole sometimes.
Yeah, he was really fun.
Seriously, when like, I can't live as this hideous monster. Then don't. Just fucking walks away. Oh, God.
I got a question about him.
Yes.
Why didn't... I'm assuming the answer is that he doesn't know, but why didn't he tell her to go to...
Afterlife?
Yeah.
I think there's probably 2 reasons. One, I think he cares very little for Reyna. So I don't think he has a serious interest in helping her.
Mm-hmm.
2, I feel like as it will be revealed later on, he doesn't trust Reyna. He knows Reyna. And he knows how manipulative she is. And I think ultimately, beyond him just not caring about her, he understands her. And maybe he's made the judgment that it would not be in Jiaying's interest to have Reyna mixed in with them. As he says to Jiaying later on this season, I've never seen her not want anything. So I think there's a real reason for that beyond maybe him not just caring about Reyna and then also him just having other priorities right now.
Mm-hmm.
So then you just couple all those things together. But when we get to the latter half of season 2, it becomes quite clear that Cal does not believe Reyna should be in Afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes it quite clear why he feels that way.
No, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. For a second, I'm not kidding you. I was like, wow, Cal, don't you care about Reyna? And then, yeah, I just realized, oh, yeah, he doesn't. He doesn't care about anybody else. So
He really doesn't.
Yeah.
So I feel like, yeah. I don't know if, like, again, like, we didn't know at this moment in time, Afterlife, where it was, what it meant, you know? I mean, he knows about it, obviously, but I think he also knows that he's not allowed to go there. I think he only intends to go back alongside his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Anywho, let's go ahead and get into Eric Goldman's review on IGN. Eric Goldman rated this episode an 8 out of 10. He called it great. Here is the review. S.H.I.E.L.D. returned from its mid-season break, hitting the ground running, as the introduction of the Inhumans was pushed even further, indicating we will be learning quite a bit about this part of the Marvel Universe a full 4 years before the Inhumans film opens. We need to insert some sound effects for just like womp womp. I mean, come on. As a longtime Marvel Comics fan, it's pretty exciting to get terms like Terrigenesis thrown around. And I was happy to see Sky's mother, Jia-Ying, Jichin Lockman, again via flashback. While I'm assuming we won't meet the likes of Black Bolt and the royal family on this show, given we're a long way away from the actors being hired for the film, womp womp, it still seems we'll get the idea of how Inhumans work on this show as far as their indoctrination process via the Mist. With Sky, they're going the route of her feeling like a freak as far as her powers go. And I think it works for the most part. As far as abilities you can't control and could be very bad go, causing earthquakes is certainly concern worthy, and her feelings of guilt in regards to Trip's death make sense. However, I wish they could have been a bit more delicate in regards to Simmons' negative reaction. See, I told you. I get that she's there to be Sky's worst nightmare, someone she cares about who is expressing disdain for exactly what's occurring to her. But yeesh, in one single scene, Simmons used the words horrific, epidemic, terminate, and plague in regards to how she felt about what was happening to Sky, and it was just a bit much and to the point of parody. I do like the idea of using Sweet Simmons as the one most scientifically concerned about what's happening and to put Sky in her most concerned place, but I hope they can just dial it back a bit going forward. The scene where the group's discussion about what was happening led to a full argument was very good. Henry Simmons was great, showing Max fury in the wake of what happened. I'm sorry, I had a Kyle moment right now. I'm sorry. Kyle Lira, one of my good friends, Kyle. You may not know of him, who you're watching, listening, but he sometimes has to stop himself because he's reminded of a reference. I just recently rewatched Ron Howard's Grinch Stole Christmas, and there's this moment in the film where they're going over his past and his love interest. Oh, actually, several of the people are going over that scene where he takes the Christmas tree and throws it around, like basically leaves. And when I was reading Max Fury, the fury, the anger, and then she goes to the muscles, and then I think of Mac, and he also has huge muscles too. So I'm so sorry. That was just it played in my head right now when I was reading that Max Fury. Yeah. But it's true though. Max Fury, in the wake of what happened, as things got very tense for he and Coulson, the scene was a bit reminiscent of the big argument on the helicarrier scene in the Avengers, as Sky's abilities began to manifest while the infighting reached a fever pitch. I guess I can kind of see the resemblance to that scene. Fitz being her big secret keeper for now is an interesting dynamic between the two of them to introduce, even while I hope it doesn't last too long. Regardless of anything else, Sky has to know Coulson wouldn't ostracize her, and certainly wouldn't just have her put down if he learned the truth. He's done way too much to protect her. So while Sky's first instinct may be to not tell anyone what's happening, it'll only be so long before it just doesn't seem plausible she wouldn't talk to Coulson about it. Coulson has gotten way more intense this season, to be sure though, and it's fun to see Clark Gregg show this side, with Coulson declaring, "While Hydra scrambles, I will crush them," And man, he did follow through on that. Seeing S.H.I.E.L.D. just out and out assassinate Hydra agents like that was actually pretty surprising, but meshes with Coulson beginning to take a more Nick Fury type approach to doing the tough jobs. As an aside, as a child of the 80s, I was thrilled to see Hunter star Fred Dryer as a Hydra leader, and then appropriately taken aback / impressed to see Hunter just walk in and shoot him. So Fred Dryer is the actor that plays that Hydra agent Bloom, and then Hunter walks in, shoots Bloom, and he's the one that gets the bullet in the head. The bullet comes in, his skull goes back, and of course the blood splatters back. That's a great moment, honestly, and a moment I don't think anybody would have seen coming on a show like this. At least people's misconceptions of this show, I should say. And then I realized, hey, Hunter just killed Hunter. I guess Fred Dryer starred in a movie or show called Hunter. I don't really know what that is. Someone behind the scenes on S.H.I.E.L.D. had to have planned that, and I say kudos to them. We got several more mentions of Baron Strucker in this episode. With Strucker's role in Age of Ultron, I'm very curious how they'll tie S.H.I.E.L.D. in, and if we might see Strucker pop here first, leading into the film's events. From what you remember, David, do you care very much for how they tied in? Or do you feel they should have just not bothered with it? Because I feel ultimately there's some complicated feelings. But real S.H.I.E.L.D. primarily usurps Coulson because of a project known as Theta Protocol. Because Coulson was eating up too much money in that, and they were already mistrustful of him for a lot of reasons. It turns out Theta Protocol was the exact helicarrier that Nick Fury had asked him to get up and running for events that would have happened in the future, which would be Age of Ultron. I mean, I think maybe that's a more appropriate question as we get closer to those weeks. I think there are elements of the tie-in that work, and maybe there are others that may not work as well. Because it kind of feels like, I think a legitimate argument that can be made is, well, the whole thing with Real S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of gets revealed in this movie, and then when we come back onto the show, it all just kind of seems resolved. And now that's it for that. Now we can get into Jiaying creating an all-out war with the Inhumans and S.H.I.E.L.D. So I don't know if that tie-in works as cleanly as the Winter Soldier tie-in for sure. But we'll see. Yeah. At the time, it seemed pretty exciting, honestly, to me, because I was watching this in real time, and you watched one episode, and it ended with them teasing the movie, and then you go that week to the theaters and you watch that movie, and like it feels like you were in a lot more of what was going on than the average person. Go ahead.
No, yeah, for sure. I was gonna mention, like, I love the moment in that episode where they tie it in, and I'm like, oh shoot, that's awesome, and I love the way they did it too. We'll get to it when we get to it, but yeah, it was that one I did for sure. Watch the episode, watch the movie, and then went back to the show. So it's really cool. But I think we're just gonna have to wait and see until like we see the actual episodes of whether it was tied in. Okay, I don't know.
Yeah. Eric continues. Reyna's transformation is pretty striking, and wow, on her literally tearing into those S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, complete with blood gushing throat. There's a lot of blood this episode, with blood gushing throat slices. Her last-minute save by the blind Inhuman in Gordon should hopefully lead to even more info on them. Given we know Luke Mitchell is also coming to the series as an Inhuman mentor to Skye, I guess that was publicized already. That's Luke Mitchell who plays... Wow! Lincoln's already coming up. Oh, man. It seems likely we'll continue to parallel Skye. By the way, Lincoln's a character who I think I've softened on. I think Lincoln I liked a lot in season 2, and then they make some choices with him in season 3 that I think are kind of now a little bit misunderstood. I remember when I was watching season 3, I was like, oh my god, Lincoln's kind of a drag. And I'm not saying he's not anymore, but I think maybe I get it. a little bit more now. We'll see when we get to season 3. But Eric was talking about how he's going to come onto the show pretty quickly here. Anyway, we only got one scene with Cal, but once more, he was wonderful showing, Kyle MacLachlan was wonderful showing Cal's insanity at work. Now that so much has been revealed about Cal, Sky, hopefully MacLachlan isn't as sidelined as he often was in the first half of the season and can be a bigger presence. In general, the action in this episode was pretty cool. From the Wetworks mission to take out Hydra to May's kick-ass moves during the fight that would lead to her and Coulson's quote-unquote deaths. That was the rehearsal scene. I have to hand it to the S.H.I.E.L.D. writers. I was wincing at Coulson yelling, "You'll never take us alive!" Even as it became clear it was a trick when Coulson was seemingly killed. But having May then call him out on it was very funny as was his retort. If I let you write the script, no one would say anything.
Mm-hmm. Also, Coulson is he's kind of dramatic in his own way. So it makes sense for him to say
and
that.
cheesy as well. So it's like, it
the
fits.
best one.
Yeah. And he also says that, like, I mean, his rationale, as he tells May also, is like, well, Bakshi has a flair for the dramatic. So he was punching it up, hamming it up, I guess you could say, on purpose. Next, Eric continues. Similarly, Bobby and Max's secret being that they were in a support group together would have been incredibly anticlimactic. So, it was also gratifying to learn that it was a complete lie on Bobby's part. The fact that they are trying to gain access to the materials Nick Fury left Coulson certainly raises some red flags. Given May's double agent status last season ended up being about her reporting to Fury himself, and thus not doing anything bad, quote unquote, even if it wasn't great for Coulson. I hope this is something a bit different, but for now, it's intriguing. It's not the same, but there are some similarities, I would say, to that. Okay. Oliver Sava for Aftershocks. He gave this episode a B. It's been, and by the way, it's been 3 months since these people saw a new episode of S.H.I.E.L.D. So there's that. It's been 3 months since we last checked in on Coulson's crew, and things sure have gotten bleak for this group. Trip is dead, Sky is in quarantine, and everyone is tossing around the blame, making Aftershocks quite the dour installment of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's an episode that shows just how different this show is from Agent Carter, but also highlights what the two series could learn from each other. After the colorful, cheeky retro fun of Agent Carter, it's hard not to notice just how bland S.H.I.E.L.D.'s visual design and scripting are. I'm going to pause it right there. There is a reason for that. I don't know if I would call the show bland, but if you would think for a second that this episode maybe looked a bit dark, it fits the mood. I would say quite clear with how the characters are feeling. The reason why Agent Carter looked colorful, well, I mean, do I even have to explain why it looked colorful? I mean, it's pretty, obvious. So, I mean, he continues, Aftershocks is an overwhelmingly gray episode. That was kind of a point to that. It was a gray feeling in the, and it had me pining for the vibrant costuming and decor of Peggy's time period. There's no reason for S.H.I.E.L.D. to be so drab, and even gritty superhero shows like Arrow and Gotham find ways to incorporate color through costumes, sets, and camera filters. What say you, David? You're the expert on those shows. I don't know if it's fair or unfair to knock S.H.I.E.L.D. in praising those other shows. I mean, Gotham looked pretty drab and gray to me. I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, for sure Gotham is very gray. That's the whole point of living in that city.
I mean, yeah.
What was it? The exact quote that you said? Can you repeat?
Arrow was saying he was also able to incorporate color through Some of those costumes were not very colorful.
They're not that very colorful, and then when they did with the Flash, it didn't look that great. Although to be fair, it was only because of one of them is because of the helmet that they had. The other one, the texture just seemed a little bit weird. By then, the costumes weren't really that great towards the end of the series for the Flash. But both Flash and Arrow in the beginning, they went pretty dark with the costumes, mainly because they were the leather. I don't know if that makes any difference.
By the way, can you believe some people? And we need to talk about this in the next podcast, Red Spotlight teaser. If anybody wants to know our thoughts on the Superman trailer, tune into the next Red Spotlight podcast. But I will say, I found it pretty ridiculous how some people were like, "Oh my god, this Superman trailer looks just like a CW show."
No. I was listening to a podcast and they were like, as someone who watched all of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you're being ridiculous, because they were trying to compare it to like another cable show. But then someone goes, as someone who watched the CW shows, or like some of the CW shows, you're ridiculous. And so I say, as someone who watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I'm not kidding you, the CW shows beginning to end, you're being ridiculous. So, but in regards to like comparing both of them, the CW were very dark most of the time because they had to really use a lot of the CGI. In the beginning of their series, they were really, really good. Towards the end, they got shit. I can't say that with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so disagree.
Yeah. Hilariously enough, though, their 7th season might have been the most vibrant and colorful one because they go back into the past.
Mm-hmm.
There is a reason for that, obviously. Yeah, again... I don't. It feels like that has gotten worse to some respect. As far as the lack of color, I don't think S.H.I.E.L.D. is one of the people to put the blame on or to really vilify. I really do believe that everything that we've seen so far. I mean, look, I'm not going to pretend it's not a byproduct of the fact that there isn't much money to go around at this point, and that most of the show is going to be filmed on the exact same locations. For the record, that's never once bothered me. For these seasons, the one time it actually got a bit distracting for me, well, actually, it was 2 times. Season 5B, it was like, okay, we're spending way too much of our time inside. Although, I understood it because there was a budgetary reason for that. Like, it was what it was. You can't go around it. And then there was one episode in season 7 where we had a... This was the year where we did reactions to the episodes, or at least reviews after we'd watched them. And there was one episode toward the end where we were like, I feel like they shouldn't have used this space for what was happening here. And I think ultimately you and I came to the idea, well, the reason why they're here in the first place was because they don't have the money to do anything else. And I think I believe Jed and Marissa even said, oh yeah, we kind of spent too much money in the first couple of weeks of being in the 30s and 50s, so this is kind of ended up being what it had to be. Mm-hmm. That's the reality sometimes. Again,
that happens with any other television show. There's always one episode where it's just inside. Legends of Tomorrow, they spent a lot of money with the CGI in the beginning, and then later on, I think for the fourth to fifth episode, there was one where they were just inside one place, and it was like they were being overrun by time pirates or something like that.
Right.
But like it happens in every show.
Yeah. But as far as like where we are right now, it's like do you feel the show is ugly to look at? Do you think it's like, I don't think at all.
No, I mean, for cable television, I'm not really looking for the greatest cinematography or anything like that.
Right,
the greatest visual masterpiece. So
yes.
It's just kind of, it's okay.
Like, again, this is how it used to be. This is why it was so, the 2010s, I think it made a big error in blurring the lines between TV and movies. Because I feel like all it resulted is people having unrealistic set of expectations for both TV and movies. Mm-hmm. It used to be like, okay, well, there are some things on TV that are not gonna be movie level. Most things on TV are not gonna be that way. And you know what? People used to be just fine with that. Anywho, the palette for Aftershocks is dominated by dull blue, black, gray, and brown. I wonder why, Oliver. Anyway, one of those names is new to those series, belonging to the eyeless individual that appeared at the end of the mid-season finale. Gordon appears in the opening scene Yada yada yada. Okay. I've been very vocal about my appreciation for Ruth Negga on this series. And in an episode that features two characters dealing with similarly life-altering developments, Negga is able to capture the reality of Reyna's situation with more emotional honesty than Chloe Bennett's Skye. Well, it's not the same situation, is it, though? They both transformed, but hey, the physical transformation itself, they both changed in very different ways. I mean, you can compare them in going through similar situations, but it's not a one-to-one, clearly. And I think what also is different is that, unlike Skye, Reyna really wanted this. She spent her whole life chasing this, and she finally got it, and at least in the immediate aftermath of it, it turned out it was her worst nightmare. So there's an emotional betrayal in there. And so if you're getting the sense that, you know, it meant more to Reyna, because it always meant more to Reyna. I recognize Reyna's struggle as something that many characters have had to deal with after Terragenesis. She's angry that her former beauty has been wiped away, replaced by leathery skin, exaggerated facial features, and thorns all over her body. Her insides feel like gravel, and she cuts herself every time she moves. Reyna is in shock, pained, and afraid, and Negga does a great work capturing the character's whirlwind of feelings and emoting through her facial prosthetics, which comes through very well. Reyna is the character that feels like she's truly become something inhuman, whereas Skye comes across as Skye with more cry face. How many bottles of eye drops do you think the crew went through for this episode? There's no way Bennett was crying for the entire filming. Okay, Skye is mourning Trip for the most part of this episode before she starts manifesting her new seismic powers, which opens an entirely different can of worms. But Bennett isn't as skilled as Negga when it comes to finding the reality behind this fantastic situation. He says Bennett has difficulty capturing the full weight of her character's experience in a way that isn't overly performative. She's acting really hard, but she's acting rather than living her character. I feel like I'm always watching Chloe Bennett playing Skye rather than just seeing Skye.
I don't.
I mean, if you feel that way, I guess you feel that way, right? I never once felt that way.
I felt that way. I never.
It feels very unfair to say this, but hey, I mean, I guess that's his perspective.
Yeah, and it's also like I feel like you say that for certain people that like you know who they are outside of whatever show or movie they're on. Like Denzel Washington, people brought that up in the Gladiator 2 movie. It's like I feel like I'm just looking at Denzel Washington. That's because like he sort of acts the same way in a lot of his movies, but like you're always entertained by him. With Chloe Bennett, I've never seen her in anything else. Even with watching Interior Chinatown, I feel like she's playing someone different and all that. So,
but you know what Chloe Bennett was before this show? She was known as Chloe Wang because she was a pop star.
Yeah, true.
That's but again, it's like I didn't know this shit.
I didn't know this.
when I was watching this show. So
to me, Chloe Bennett is Skye. Like, if that makes any sense. So I, unless he's seen her in other things or he's heard about her, I don't know. I can't really agree with that.
Okay. One thing that S.H.I.E.L.D. has over Agent Carter is a diverse cast and a number of strong female relationships. Skye interacts with each of the women on the team while in quarantine, and writers Jed and Marissa use each conversation to spotlight the different dynamics between the females on the team. May is the stern SO that wants to make sure that Skye is all right but doesn't want to show too much emotion. Bobby has been in quarantine before and is the friendly presence that provides Skye with materials to get her through the isolating experience. And Simmons, who was developing some great romantic chemistry with the deceased Trip, is quickly becoming anti-superpower, which will probably cause some friction when she learns that Skye can create earthquakes with her mind now. Even with the considerable improvements made to the cast and plot in Season 2, S.H.I.E.L.D. still is missing that special something that made Agent Carter such an immediate Again, this is an interesting divide here. There are plenty of people, your sister included, David, and let's not, we're not going to ignore her sins or transgressions. This is one of them. One of her transgressions happens to be having a distaste for Chloe Bennett. As inexplicable as that is, okay. And then the other one is immediately loving Agent Carter, and I don't blame her for loving Agent Carter, but I don't get the idea of like Agent Carter is great, but S.H.I.E.L.D. is like, eh. So, hey, I guess Oliver found a friend in your sister. Haley Atwell was that special something for the 1940s set series, and while I would love to see Peggy appear on S.H.I.E.L.D. via time travel or as an LMD, the show needs to find a way to make one of its established characters as captivating as Captain America's former flame. I think they have, Oliver. Season 2 of S.H.I.E.L.D. has had a much stronger narrative through line than the first, but the writers need to make sure the character work doesn't get buried in the larger plot motion. Did he just say that?
Repeat it.
Did he really just say that? He says that Season 2 has had a much stronger narrative through line than the first, but the writers need to make sure that the character work doesn't get buried in the larger plot motion. And I was like, did he really just say that?
He wasn't paying attention. That's...
earlier in the insert that we put when we were reacting to Emma, and even Emma was describing it perfectly, the show was doing both. The plot mechanizations were being put forward at the exact same time that the characterization. There was characterization in every episode, for the most part. Every episode. Anyway, some stray observations that he puts in here. The violence in this episode is a lot more severe than we would normally get on this show. Raina is slitting throats left and right, and there's a surprisingly graphic shot of a Hydra lieutenant getting shot in the head when Bobby and Lance reveal Coulson's successful plan to turn Hydra operatives against each other. A secret agent show shouldn't shy away from violence, and the action definitely has more impact this week. Adrienne Palicki is a series regular now, which makes me very happy. She has loads of charisma and she's great in action sequences. Now, she just needs more to do. Apparently, Radio Shack is a Hydra front, which means bad news for Hydra. Ooh. God. Judging by her unnecessary flipping into battle, it looks like May has been getting fighting lessons from the archers on Arrow. I don't know what that reference is. What the flipping into battle? Okay. I'm sad that this show killed off Jiaying because I really like Deechin Lockman as an actress and would like to see more of her on this. You're going to. You're going to. By the way, I wonder if we should start doing this. Because he mentioned something about the preview for the next episode. So the next episode is Who We Really Are. So what I'm going to do in this moment, David, if you can bear with me, I'm going to find the TV spot. And maybe we can do a reaction to it. It's like 30 seconds. But every time an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would end, they would have a promo. So let me go ahead. I'm going to send the link over to you right now via Messenger. And then just have it at the beginning, ready to go, and we can queue it up as soon as you're ready.
On a new Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
I thought that I could handle it, but I can't. It's too much. Wherever Sky goes,
death follows. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Next Tuesday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
So, you always watch the show on Hulu. Did you ever see these?
I don't think so.
Because these always played immediately after the credits. Or while the credits were playing, they would have this as the preview for next week.
I want to say no.
Okay. So what did you think?
I mean, answer my question of I wonder what Mac's gonna think when he finds out.
Well, I mean, who knows, right? Because like that was cut a different way. Like I can tell you for that. I mean, it's a bit misleading because the whole episode isn't about that. It takes quite a bit. A lot of the dialogue from that TV spot is like from the last 5 minutes.
Okay.
So, this is actually interesting seeing now that I know what the episode is. Like, yeah, a lot of that stuff, I'm not saying it's not a part of the episode, but it kind of comes in the last 5 to 10 minutes. So I brought it up because I was reading here in Oliver's Stray Observations. He says, next week, Sif returns. Also, Sky breaks more stuff. And then some, oh my God, I missed it. Oh my God. Cal is such an ass. While we were talking over it a little bit, while Raina was like complaining about her, like the thorns on her, Cal literally says to her, "You always did like flowers."
Oh yeah, I remember that line.
Oh my God. And then he shouts out Fitz's line, "You're just different now." And there's nothing wrong with that. And that brings this week to a close. Any lingering comments you want to add on, David, before we bring today to an end? As far as this episode is concerned, maybe watching that preview, that TV spot, did that do anything to rejigger some of your memory from what might happen next week?
Yeah. I remember the Sif. I remember the Sif episode, so I know what like the main plot is and all that. So, but in terms of this episode, I do have one minor complaint, which was in the beginning. Did not like the exposition. After Jain talked to the teleporting kid, it was when he was eating. They were on some second floor watching over him and all that, and I didn't like the dialogue. It was like something of oh, I'm so glad like your slow aging has really
slowly
helped your slow aging has really helped a lot of people and the generations and all that, blah blah blah. And then just I don't know, just the way they were talking to each other, it just felt exposition-y, and I'm like, okay. I feel like some of this information you could have left it for another time. I don't know if it just their sole focus should have been on the kid instead of like what the whole purpose is for her in the afterlife and all that. So it could have been better.
Okay. I don't feel the same way. I didn't really notice it too much. But I mean that's totally fair. It just didn't work for you. Okay. Well, with that being said, thank you all for tuning in, watching and listening. We look forward to an amazing 2025. Can you believe it? With Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. going forward. We thank everybody who has watched and listened and commented along with us and has taken time to relive this series with us. I know I say it all the time, but I personally am getting a lot out of reliving this show week to week. And I'm very happy that it seems that people have taken an interest in whatever that is, in whatever shape or form it may come. So, and also I'll I'll plug our main Red Spotlight podcast. Tune in for number 497 for our discussion on the Superman trailer. 496, we do get into Superman a little bit, but then some other things. But I think 497, I'm hoping anyway, is going to be when we talk about the Superman trailer, and then also perhaps do a review on the Christopher Reeve documentary, which was titled Superman something? Is that what it was called, or what was the title of the documentary?
I think it was
anyway,
like Superman, the Christopher Reeve story or something like that.
Basically, which you can watch on Max, and David had the pleasure of watching it in theaters. So that's our hope anyway, and our plug for some other superhero content. And then, of course, we also have audio commentaries on somewhere on this page for plenty of Marvel stuff, including commentaries with both of us on Captain Marvel, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I believe also Endgame and Infinity War, as well as Into the Spider-Verse, which reminds me at some point we should do one for Across the Spider-Verse, because, man, it's been a minute.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I believe the newer commentaries that we did this year, for those of you who are interested, include The Wizard of Oz, As Above, So Below, The Little Mermaid 2023, and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. We should probably do a little bit more in 2024. I mean, we meant to do more commentaries in 2025, I should say. But we meant to do more this year. It just...
Yeah.
We were also terribly busy. I got to tell you, this might have been the year where it nearly broke us to just even be here. Because like we all of us have been so incredibly busy with everything that we're doing. And that was before we embarked on doing a whole S.H.I.E.L.D. series. I think going into 2024, there was no expectation. There was no discussion about doing anything like this. It was, again, I took inspiration from Emily B's video, and I'm like, I need to watch this show again, but maybe we can do something with it. And then I talked to David, and like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
And now here we are. We're like, we've done 33 episodes. 33 episodes of 136. So we still got about a little over 100 to go before we're done. So, I mean, about a little bit of the way there. But thank you all for watching and listening. Thank you, David, especially for all of the work that you have been doing all this year for making this happen. I know that it would have been a tall order for me to do it on my own. And then I think you have definitely been a godsend in being able to contribute so much with the editing. It used to be a time many, many years ago where the expectation was on me and on my shoulders to do all of it on my own. And at some point that got to be too taxing, and I was like, okay, well, you know what? We need to just like lessen this and pull it back, because I just can't do this all by myself. So thank you very much for all of the work that you do. If it wasn't for you, I don't think we would be able to do this show. I'm hoping that in 2025 we're going to have the space to do some more. I don't know maybe if there's another big show out there. I mean, ideally, we could have done reactions for Agatha or Penguin, or maybe even what was that other Star Wars show, but quite frankly with you, or maybe even Arcane. But the point is, this was just a bad year for me personally in caring about anything happening in TV. For me, it was just S.H.I.E.L.D. Everything else, couldn't be bothered. Some of that stuff I mentioned was bad. Some of it was actually pretty good. I'm not saying it was all like disposable. I'm saying that my overall interest... Oh, by the way, there was a new House of the Dragon season, wasn't there, this year? Completely forgot about that show. And I blame it on people taking way too damn long in between seasons. You know? There was also an Invincible season that's been out for a year now. Can't be bothered to watch it. Don't have any interest anymore. And what time is there when every year we got some brand new movies to watch? And that takes our priority. So, hey, we're going to come back. And we're going to do what we can do. So, that might be our new motto here on this show. We'll do what we can do.
Yeah.
Thank you all for watching and listening. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.